So let's start with the first product. The first one we're going to talk about is Ranger. And I will say oh, I see Boo's in the house. Hello. I will say that, when I did that little teaser about Stampers Anonymous and Ranger, many of you assumed that it would be a new color. Well, no, not quite yet, because a new color, I would usually say a new color. And this is a big hint of what it is. But before I show you exactly what it is, I wanted to just kind of take you through a little, I don't know, timeline, if you will, about this product. And the product is Archival ink. So yes, it is new Distress Archival. But here's the thing. When I started out, even before I designed a product with Ranger, this was my permanent ink pad of choice. And I know there's a lot of permanent ink pads out there. There's so many different ones. And I honestly don't think that there is one ink for everything, right? As makers, I think that everybody's going to have a different type of ink for what it is you're trying to make. But for my general stamping, my waterproof stamping, I always went with Ranger's Archival ink. The reason is this is a waterproof, permanent ink. It is oil-based. And that's what makes it different than StazOn, which is solvent-based. So I like StazOn for things like stamping on plastic or something that I want to dry very quickly. But in my general stamping, I prefer an oil-based ink because I think it produces better detail. So I've always used Archival. Now, with my love of Archival, right, there's also been some things that I wish could be different in Archival, and that would really be a color palette. As you know, I love color in my world of distress. So when I asked Ranger for colors of Archival, what they did is they actually gave the designers a palette initially. So back in 2016, okay, 5 years ago, we launched this palette. And I have a palette, Dina has a palette, Di has a palette. And when I say palette, it's this jumbo ink pad. You can see the scale difference. But when you opened it up, it was 4 of these, what I refer to as regulation size ink pads in a case. Now, this is great if you're doing small stamps. Maybe you're working in a planner or you're doing ATCs. You're doing things where you have little images that you can kind of tap in that quadrant and stamp. But if you're trying to use it for anything else, any kind of regular stamping like the Professor or anything like that, this is ridiculous. It's impossible to use for bigger stamps because these don't come out. You have to kind of work in there. So this definitely has a place. It's still available. But I said to Ranger, I want these bigger. I want these bigger. They're like, no, this is Ranger. We're going to keep this as this. But what we will do is we'll kind of go the mini route. So in 2019, I was able to launch Distress Archival in minis, right? So it's the same formulation. Even though it says Distress, it's still the Archival formulation. It's oil-based ink. And these are waterproof inks, right? Mini ink pads in the same Archival formulation. But the reason they're Distress is these are the colors of the Distress palette. That's what's in here. Hickory Smoke, Vintage Photo, Ground Espresso, Black Soot. So these are sold in kits, the mini Archivals. So there's the regular vintage, there's the warm, there's the cool. And these have all been out, again, 2016, 2019. And you may have seen in the videos, right, I like to use my mini Archivals. Now, I'll be honest, when it comes to working with permanent ink pads, okay, 99% of the time, I am stamping in a dark color. On a card, on a background, because my background is colorful. It uses ink, it uses oxide, it uses whatever. So this is pretty much what I go to. Sometimes I'll want a permanent ink in a color, but not often. So this was really my go-to. And honestly, I'm not exaggerating. And those of you that have followed along, maybe you've been to the trade shows, maybe you've even helped in the challenge. For 5 years, guys, five years, since this came out, 5 years, I have wanted these colors in this size ink pad. The regulation size ink pad. And for 5 years, Ranger has told me no. And I'm just being honest, nothing against Ranger, but people, they're like, not happening. You have your minis, you have your palette, have a nice day. And it's like, and I appreciate all that, but as a maker, as a stamper, having a regulation size ink pad for big stamps is very key. And I wasn't giving up. And when people would email, I'm like, email Ranger. Again, if you've seen older videos, you know that we've had this discussion and many of you have been like, let's go. So here was the compromise that we did, because there is compromise involved in this. And the compromise is this. This is what's new. This is the Distress Archival in a stack, okay? Meaning it is these 4 colors, the 4 colors that I want, that I use all the time, the same 4 colors that are in these minis, which would be Hickory Smoke, Vintage Photo, Ground Espresso, and Black Soot in regulation size ink pads. Now these ink pads, the compromise, the trade-off is that these large ink pads are only sold like this in a block, right?
I like that.
They are not, I love it. Because to me, it's like, these are the colors that I'm gonna use, so I don't have to worry about getting one, the other, if I already have it in a mini, if I have this. So this is how it's barcoded. They're not individually barcoded. This is how they're sold. Now, how long they stay out, I'm not sure. I'm not gonna push my luck because I just know that I have them, and that's great. Because the cool thing about, of course, all of the archivals have re-inkers. So Ranger does offer our Distress Archival re-inkers for all the colors that are in the minis, which of course would be these as well. So if you get the stack, you can re-ink these the same way you would re-ink your regular ink pads. Now these are a little juicier than the traditional archival, and I'm going to demonstrate that a little bit later because next we're going to get into stamps and stencils. But this is the big excitement. When I said inks, this is what I mean, inks. And I'm seeing the chat, and thank you guys. It's been a long time coming, really, 5 years for this regulation size ink pad, but the archival formulation, you're gonna see, because it works on UPO, it works over Oxide, all those things where people go, what is the best ink for this? This would be my ink of choice, and I love the fact that now I have the colors that I use the most in the block. And honestly, there's no plans to do any of the other colors big. In fact, I don't even want them. I mean, the same way I speak to you as a maker where I say, hey guys, as makers, just buy what you're gonna use. I'm the same way from a designer. I just wanna design what I'm gonna actually use. And yes, occasionally I'm gonna wanna stamp in peeled paint or Mermaid Lagoon as a waterproof ink, but not all the time. So the need for a larger ink pad when it comes to space and all that, I just don't need it. But these guys, I needed them in my life, and I'm so happy to have them. All right, so thank you, Ranger. 5 years, it was worth the wait, definitely, and you'll see exactly how they work. I'm gonna demo them, I'll talk about colors, I'll show you swatches, I'll do all that. But next we wanna get into stamps and stencils, because a shout out to the team at Stampers Anonymous, Ted, they're at a show in Florida. So hello to everyone that is at the show in Florida. So they're waiting to see the stamps and stencils as well. So they can be put on for sale. All right. So here is the release with Stampers Anonymous. Now, again, I decided to kind of rethink how I launch stamps and stencils, because historically I've launched 15, 18 sets at the same time. And let's face it, as makers, it's very overwhelming. For your wallet, it's very overwhelming. So this feels right. And I think even the makers that created these cards, and a shout out to them, I think they would have to agree, because they were really able to create amazing, amazing makes with these sets, because they weren't distracted by 18 different sets to choose from. It was like, these are the 5 sets, and you're gonna see how different they are. Now, in true Stampers Anonymous style, I like each set to have its own idea, meaning these are not designed to work together, but you're gonna see how amazing they do work together, but they're not designed that way. Each one is its own idea, in the hopes that every time I launch stamps and stencils, there's going to be something, one of the sets, that maybe resonates with you as a maker, right? All right, so here's the first one. The first one, this is called Floral Outlines, right? This is CMS 430. And what I love about this, and again, I'll get more into all the makes, but you can see that unlike a regular outline, because there's tons of florals out there, this one is very loose, very doodly, very sketchy. And this lends itself to many things. For those that love to watercolor, perfect. For those that love to do no-line watercolor, like Jen did, Jen Shirkus did one, perfect for that as well. For those that like to do mixed media, where you color outside the lines, that would be me. This works well, because you can see that nothing is solid, nothing is connected, and you have 3 different beautiful floral arrangements to choose from. And the nice thing about this is that its perspective could be changed however you want. See, like, look how great that stamp looks this way. You notice this flower. But then when it was this way, you notice this flower, right? Or these buds that come up here. And all of these are designed that way. So when you have this floral stamp, maybe you just want leaves coming into your card, right? So that's the cool thing about this particular design. If you don't want to have to arrange florals, this is cool. And I love, again, where do you see all the different makes with this stamp set? So that is Floral Outlines. The next one really was inspired by my last Sizzix release when we did the Funky Cactus. I am so grateful that so many of you love the Funky Cactus, that it's not just trend, because that's really what the brand said. They're like, Tim, that's just so trend. I'm like, I live in Arizona. Cactus is my world, man. But I just think there's something about the aesthetic, the design, the quirkiness of Cactus. So this set is called Mod Cactus. And you'll notice here that it has different images. It's going to have a solid and an outline. Now we'll talk about weeded. I mention this all the time in releases. There are certain sets that Stampers Anonymous will weed, meaning after the stamp is die cut, which these are, they will go in and hand remove this material from your set. So you end up with something like that. And if sets have a lot of surface tension, then we do that, right? If there's some smaller components that we might be worrying about falling off of the set, like down here, these little die ones, we'll leave it in here. Now you as the maker, if you don't like this, you can weed it yourself. You can peel this off and you can throw this away and be done. But just so you know, that's why sometimes they are and sometimes they aren't. But here's the cool thing about these. They are designed with a solid, so you can stamp your favorite colors of Archival, your oxides, your inks, and then you would go over it and layer it. And this is where Archival really comes in, because if you like to stamp in acrylic paint or you like to stamp in oxide, sometimes stamping over the top of it just with Distress ink doesn't provide a very crisp detail. Archival will. And so that's why this set really lends itself to these inks as well, because we have the ability to stamp the detail layer in Archival ink. And you can see all these cactus, they've got just really cool, quirky, modern patterns, little prints that are on the actual pots of each one. And you can also tell that the solid, and you'll see from the makes as well, the solid is not designed to fill this area completely. It's supposed to be very off-register, very modern, very quirky, but you can also use it to fill this in perfectly. You're going to see like some watercolor cards. Anita did a very cool one where you stamp it, and when you watercolor, it fills in the blank. So if you're not in that off-register mode, you can still use it as your filler. And then of course we have flowers. So that's Mod Cactus, just a fun set. Now, if you've been following along and you see the sneak peeks, this has probably been the most sneaked peeked set. Does that make sense? Sneak peeked? I think so. And this one is called Inquisitive. And when I saw this art, because I'll tell you, if this is your first Stampers Anonymous Live, I am not an artist. I am not a drawer. I do not draw any of the images. All of the images that I do, I license from other talented artists that offer license that allow me to put together collections and sell them. So I do not, own all of the artwork. I just license it, and I have the ability to kind of curate art from different artists to combine on a set, right? So these images are not all from the same artist. I just like the ability to say, okay, this works with this works with this. And so this particular set, what I wanted is, I saw these guys, these gentlemen, and they had a very cool look, a very inquisitive look. I think I loved kind of that raised brow. I love the monocle. They just had a neat vibe to them. And so I wanted to pair them with a set that could be used for many different things, right? Maybe you are looking for a masculine card, or maybe you're just looking for something that's a little bit more, I don't know, industrial or steampunk or quirky. And you're going to see so many different styles and themes even with this set. But I also wanted to pair them with just quotes, because sometimes, even if you have a quirky set, it's hard to find words that really go with the art itself. And because this is Inquisitive, I just wanted to do all questions, like how old, right, for a birthday, what's up, you good, guess who? I thought that was really a cool set. But because of the bold artistry, I wanted to pair it with some very unique elements. Like, I love this bullseye. You're going to see unbelievable ways the makers use the bullseye. Then we've got kind of this sketched plus sign. We've got those heavy dots. I love a good number strip, right? So these guys were scaled that they would fit on an A2 card pretty proportionately, where they would go right in the center. But I also wanted them, I just thought together they were great. So this one, they have the individual guys, and then they also have that trio. And again, because of these really tiny quotes, they are not weeded. But if this bothers you, peel that off, throw it away, and you're off. But man, I love this. Inquisitive, so good, so fun. All right. So last year at Christmas time, we launched Bold Tidings, and this was such a popular series. There was actually 4 sets for Christmas, and I got so many messages and requests to continue this with everyday sayings. So this is the first one. This is called Bold Sayings. And really what this is just a nice bold stamp. It has a cool distress aesthetic to the font. This way, if you're stamping it, you don't have to worry about it always being solid and perfect, because by design, we embrace our imperfection. So we can stamp this with archivals or oxide. We can do embossing. But the nice thing about this is this will fill up a card front perfectly. But because they are bold, it also gives us the ability to layer. And you're going to see this set used pretty much with every set in this release, not only by itself, but layered on top of something else. Because when you have a bold font, it's not going to be overpowered by a background. And that's what I like. So we have, hello, my friend. Thank you so much. Focus on the good. Happy birthday wishes to you. And best day ever. And when I'm designing this, I always try to think about like, what word do I want to really pop on that particular one? And that's what determines how I lay these out. All of these are the same width. So when these work, these will fit also on a number 8 tag. So if you are a tag maker, this is going to be great because you can fit it on those also. So that's Bold Sayings. Good set. And then the final set for this release, because there are only 5, this is Observations. Again, another favorite. You've probably seen this guy, and you could tell he's pretty big. He's a big guy because I loved his detail. And a shout out to Stampers Anonymous, of course, for red rubber. That really allows all that detail to show. So you can see the illustration in his hair, in his face. I dig that mustache, that cool monocle. But the great thing about this set is that he can be used many different ways. The observations, he can be used in his entirety. You can use it that side, you can use that side, you can use that way. And that's what makes him so cool. That's why I wanted his scale to be really big, because I didn't want you to only be limited to just stamping him in the middle, stamping in the middle. By big enough, you can put him anywhere you want, and he's still going to be the star of the show. Now with him, because he just was observations, I kind of thought that he was just thinking of things. So I wanted to add this really cool sketch gear border. I like this because, again, it has just a really sketchy look to it, but it also has that straight edge. So that's going to allow me to have it coming from the top of a card or from the side of something or from the bottom. And then these quotes. Now these quotes, they were just meaningful to me. I like that. I think as makers, we really need these reminders. So, you know, this was really kind of a set for me, just to remind myself that these things really matter in our creative universe, right? Simplicity is its own form of artistry, right? That's a reminder that not everything has to be a creative casserole. I say that all the time, that sometimes you can just throw a little bit of ink on the background, and that in itself is art. It may not be art to you in that moment because you want it to be that creative casserole, but sometimes simplicity is its own form of artistry, right? Being lost is worth being found, right? Sometimes we just kind of lose our way. We don't have our creative mojo, or we're just having a rough time. But sometimes being lost is worth being found, because when you get that spark again, or when things turn around in our life, it makes what we went through that much more worthwhile, because we appreciate that creative spark returning, or we appreciate what we get, or the new outlook on life. And so I just think that that's such a profound statement. The future belongs to the curious. I believe that wholeheartedly, right? The future is about your curiosity. In order for our industry to grow and thrive, in our world, technology, anything, that is the future. That the curious ones, the ones that are answering that what if, and let's just say as a maker, hopefully you guys are that same way, right? Maybe when you first started out in papercraft or mixed media, you were so hesitant to try anything unless someone gave you permission to do it or assured you that it would work out. But then as you do it more and more, the more curious you are, the more you discover totally cool things, new color combos, new looks, new techniques that maybe you haven't seen before or haven't seen yet. But that is the future. It belongs to the curious. And then imagination is the reality of a dreamer. And that is true, because for me, I'm a dreamer, and that's my reality. And so I think that if you allow your imagination to always kind of have a forefront in your thought process, that turns into the reality. That's just going to allow you to always dream bigger and think of things, and not be afraid to just step outside your comfort zone every now and again to just explore. So those were my observations, and that's really why I called it observations because I just thought these super important for our everyday make. So those are the 5 new sets from Stampers Anonymous. These are all available now. Everything that I'm showing, all of the stamps, the stencils, even the archival, available now, shipping now, worldwide. All right. So now let's get into the stencils real quick, and then we're going to get into the demo and, of course, the makes. So for layering stencils, we have 3 new stencils and, of course, the mini version of all 3 of these designs. This first one, well, I don't really even bother naming them anymore. I'm sure I gave it a descriptive word, right? So maybe I called it nature or something, but you could see anything you want in this. You could see little rainbows if you want. Maybe you can just see little squiggles if you use them this way. Maybe upside down, you can see little clouds or little scallops, but I just like that very hand-drawn sketch. This is perfect for inking, but also for texture, and you're gonna see a great card. There's one that really caught my eye that Tammy B did, where she used this with glaze and had just different colors. It's just a cool stencil because, again, it has a lot of little details, and you can use whatever part you want of it. Remember, if you didn't say want these rainbows, if you will, you could mask these off, and then you can get a very cool repeat pattern with little detail, or vice versa. This one, I love a good dot, but I love a good dot that, I don't know, looks like bedrock, right? Just looks like stones. So the cool thing about this, we have a nice gridded pattern that it's very symmetrical, but the circles, the big and the small, they're all very organic. And I think that that's really good when we're adding texture, when we're adding ink, because we do get a very cool repeat pattern, but it lends itself to so many other artistic styles that sometimes if circles are too modern or too crisp, they kind of, in my world, they kind of compete with images that are sketchy. So that's what I like about that one. And this one, this is really unique. And wait till you see some of the ways that this was used. In fact, Sharon even used this as like a stained glass window. But this is really just like a city map. I always love looking at maps where you see this roads and rivers and things, because all of the lines and how they intersect and the great shapes that they create is so organic and authentic. That's what I love about this. So to do this stencil, I thought that's very, very cool. And that's all it was designed for, was really just that map. And what is really important to remember about stencils is that these are designed as accents. They can be used for backgrounds with ink or texture or paint or sprays or any of that. And you'll see, and I'll try to call them out in cards, that sometimes you don't even notice that stencil because you're focusing on the image. And that's the key. The stencil's a background. But sometimes people will use it actually as the foreground, right? And you'll see that. The reason I do minis is because scale matters, right? These are not just cropped versions of these stencils. These are actually this exact same layout shrunk down, all right? A little bit over half, and a little bit less than half, I should say. The great thing about this, of course, from a scale perspective, is that if you're doing smaller things, maybe you're doing ATCs or maybe you're doing tags, you're doing whatever, you don't want to put something so big because maybe this pattern is going to be so giant compared to these little guys, right? Maybe you're going to use those guys over this background and that would just be so big. But if you had that smaller scale is going to be way more proportionate to those guys right there. So that's why I think anytime, even if you're not using these stencils, even if you're not buying any of these, if you're buying stencils from your favorite stencil company, make sure that you kind of, as you're collecting them, purchase things that have different scale, because you're going to see the importance and significance of that when you're working with it. So those are the stamps and stencils from Stampers Anonymous. That is the release. So if you were just here for that, that's it. But now let's get into what it all is. We're going to talk first about archival, and then we'll go in and see the amazing makes. Thanks for all the kind comments. I see everybody's words. I like it. I don't know if I have a favorite yet. You, Mario? I don't know. It just depends. I think with most people, it depends on my mood, right? Thanks. Oh, it's good. I see Vicky. I see Manzi. How are you? Good. Miss you. All right. Let's get into this. I'm going to actually, I've got just the travel mat. I'm just going to peel this off because I don't need the craft mat for this. Just be kind of quick. It could stay on there, but I'm just going to take this off just for that. All right. Hold on. This is going to kind of bother me. I'm just going to set this here because honestly, it's just, you don't have to put this under here, but I don't want, it's at my feet and it's driving me crazy. So I'm just going to put it here just for the sake of the demo. All right. Let's talk about archival and what it does, why it's important, what do Why would you want it? Well, if you need a permanent ink, first of all. If you're doing any kind of layering, you need a good permanent ink. And Ranger's Archival ink is my favorite. The fact that it's oil-based means that the ink will sit on top of the surface. If you use it with any other kind of water-based inks, whether that's dilutions, distress, anything like that, oil and water don't mix. And so when you use them together, this can be used as a resist. There's many techniques that I share where you can actually stamp in Archival first, like you could stamp in Hickory Smoke, which is gray, and then you could blend over the top or spray over the top pink, and this will actually resist that pink because it's oil and water. But when you stamp it on surfaces, certain papers, it's going to sit on the top. Even though it's going to dry permanent, it doesn't permeate into the surface much because of that oil-based property. And so what I want to share with you is the colors, of course, and then I want to talk about papers, because as any demo that I do, whether we're distressing or doing texture, even basic stamping, paper matters, okay? It still does. So let's get into the colors so you can see them if you haven't seen them already. Now again, Distress Archival, waterproof, permanent, it'll say right on the label so you always know. That's the Archival formulation in the Distress colors. So here are the colors. We have Hickory Smoke, a wonderful cool gray, and this is the same color that's in the Distress Ink and Oxide. Of course, I have Hickory Smoke. Vintage Photo, a classic, definitely a classic. Ground Espresso. The reason I went with Ground Espresso over Walnut Stain is because I wanted it to be a very, very dark brown. The darker the better, because you know I like a lot of brown. So if I'm doing a brown background and I still want to stamp a brown image, I needed to go with the darkest brown in the line in order to achieve that, and that is Ground Espresso, and I really love just how rich that is. And then of course we have Black Soot. Now these colors, these are stamped on watercolor cardstock, okay, Distress watercolor cardstock. These are stamped on Distress specialty stamping paper. Now if you aren't familiar with this substrate, this is a matte coated paper. It is a matte coated paper on both sides, so it doesn't have any shine. It is cardstock, it's not plastic or anything like Yupo. But the great thing about Distress specialty stamping is if you are a stamper and you're really going for the perfect stamping, okay, that's really what we're going for. You can see that the detail is so much clearer or crisp on a specialty stamping paper than on watercolor paper. And I'm going to go through all the different papers. I'm going to talk about mixed media, all sorts of things. And I'm going to also talk about certain things that this ink goes for. I see a lot of questions going, can you use it with Copics? Can you use it with alcohol ink? Can you use it with this? I'll definitely address all of those, right? First, we're just going to get into the colors, and then I'll talk about certain mediums you can and shouldn't, I'm never going to say can't, can and shouldn't work with, right? But you can see just the side-by-side comparison between watercolor paper and the specialty stamping of how the color pops even more. So the first rule, of course, when you have any kind of ink pad is swatch it on the paper that you're going to normally work with, but also test it out on some other substrates, because you might be surprised of its clarity. Okay. Again, these all have re-inkers to them. So the same way, this is not in a glass bottle. These are just like they do the regular Archival re-inkers. So you can re-ink your pads indefinitely, but this is only sold as a stack. And I do hope Ranger keeps this around for a while. I hope they offer this. There's no talk of it going away, so I don't want you to think that. But it's just one of those things that they finally agreed to do, and I just hope they continue to do this for a while. All right. So when do you use Archival and when don't you use Archival? Well, the thing to remember is that it is an oil-based waterproof ink. But because it's waterproof, it doesn't say oil-based solvent-proof ink, does it? No. So could you stamp this and then put alcohol ink over it? No. Because it's not solvent proof, it's waterproof, all right? So you have to keep that in mind. Could you put any water-based medium over it, like watercolor, Distress ink, oxide, sprays, acrylic paints? Yes, 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 and yes. Could you stamp over it and then it would be waterproof, meaning you could add more layers and it wouldn't bleed? Yes and yes. But if you are going to put a solvent over this, it is not solvent proof. Now, I asked my friend Jen Shirkus, because she does a lot with Copics and I do not work with Copics. I'm like, give me your opinion on how well you think Archival works with Copics. Now, she has a great explanation, and she might be doing a video, or she might do a blog post on it, because again, her little demo that she shared with me made perfect sense. But basically, if you're going to use Archival with Copics and you're working with darker saturated colors, it holds up fairly well. However, if you're going to use this and you're going to color with light colors of Copics, she showed like yellow and pink, this will bleed because again, it's waterproof, not solvent proof. But she did have really good results with more saturated colors, and in her words, and I don't want to quote it specifically, but she's like, but this color alone, Black Soot, is worth it. Okay, and I'll tell you why Black Soot specifically is so important to this palette, and probably the one that pushed all of this more than anything. So for Copic users, I would suggest trying it out, see if you're happy with it. You may already have a favorite ink, and that's great. For those of you using alcohol ink, I would suggest stamping over the alcohol ink when it's dry with Archival. That's what I use, and I'll show you a sample. This is Yupo, right? Alcohol ink. This is Yupo with alcohol ink and alloys, and you can see, I mean, look at how beautiful and crisp that stamps, right? And what I love about using Archival over alcohol ink is, unlike a solvent-based ink, say StazOn, solvent reacts with solvent. So if you stamp in a solvent-based ink on a solvent background, sure, your image is going to stay, but your image is also going to start to blur a little bit because your image is reacting with this ink. But because this is oil-based, oil is not going to react with solvent, and that's why I love stamping with it. I mean, seriously, look at that detail. On Yupo, which is plastic, it's unbelievable. That's why I chose the stamp, because I wanted you to see those little halftone marks. They didn't fill in. Those little lines didn't fill in. Really, really cool. But there's not that right ink for everything, right? You might be doing something specific that this ink is not going to work because of your expectations, but you just need to try out different things. This is what I love about Archival. Now, if you're stamping on fabric, also a great fabric ink. You can stamp on fabric. Is it permanent? Yes. Washable? Yes. Dryable? Yes. It is permanent. Do you have to heat set it? Not necessarily, but it's always a good idea that you heat set anytime you put colorant on fabric. It just makes that color maintain its integrity longer, but it is a great ink for that. I love the fact that it is a permanent ink. All right, but let's get into, in my opinion, the wow factor. And for those that have seen a demo, when I was demoing these guys when they first came out, before we had the regulation size, which is what I refer to these as, this is what it's all about. Now, don't get me wrong, I love these colors because I definitely love having a gray, and you're going to see it's a great background ink. I already mentioned why I wanted ground espresso, because sometimes I want a really dark ink. And vintage photo, that's just a classic sepia color. So it's fantastic for stamping over photographs or just creating a rust or sepia vibe. I love that color. But this one, Black Soot, this is where it's all about. And I'm going to do a side-by-side comparison of this. And I'm sure right now the people at Ranger are gritting their teeth, rolling their eyes, doing all of that. But they've seen me do it before, and now they're probably used to it, because this is why I want it. There is no, in my opinion, in the Ranger world, there's no better black ink than Black Soot from a color perspective. So this is going to be a specialty stamping that's going to be coated, but I can also just show you on watercolor paper. All right. So here's what we've got. We're going to start with Jet Black Archival. I just saw some, are these new colors in Archival formulation? Yes, these are Archival inks. It's the Archival formulation, same formulation as this in the color. So here is Jet Black, right? You may have Jet Black, you may have been using it forever, and it's kind of your go-to black ink. And when you look at it, you're like, yeah, it's a black ink. Now, when you start working on coated papers, even though you get that intense color, you're going to notice that, well, it's a nice black ink. But Black Soot, if you're familiar with Distress, you know that even Black Soot is a very dark black ink. And in the world of Archival, it is no different, okay? That side by side, that is why I wanted to have Black Soot. Because when you compare the colors, now you see Jet Black as blue, and you see Black Soot as black. So that is watercolor paper, Jet Black, Black Soot, and a coated paper, right? So coated paper, the reason I like to swipe it is because coated is always going to give you that light source, that undertone. And so Black Soot is going to give you some nice undertones of darker black. But here is where you really notice that Jet Black has undertones of like blue and purple. Totally, I mean, that right there, that's a difference, right? When you see that side by side, that is why this ink pad alone is is what I think kind of started the whole mission of like, I need this. This is my go-to black stamping pad, is black soot. And I know in the past, if you've seen older videos, we've talked about making a DIY pad where you take, you know, the DIY archivals, because they do sell this case empty. We also do the DIY Distress. But if you've tried that, you know that when you try to make your own ink pad, it works, but it's not nearly as saturated as one that is made, right? Because when they make an ink pad, the entire pad is soaked in ink and then wrung out and put into the case. And you can see it's got a nice raised edge, not raised like a regular Distress pad, but nice raise to it, so it's going to be perfect for stamping. So from a color perspective, you can see the importance of that. Now we're going to get into papers. All right, papers, very, very important, okay? Because papers are going to change the color. They are. It just is what it is. So let's take you through one color at a time. It's kind of interesting when I'm working on like a little mat. All right, so we're going to start with Hickory Smoke, gray, right? So on watercolor paper, looks really good, right? You can see that nice subtle gray. It's a nice cool gray. I like that. This one is just white heavy stock. So this is not coated. This is white heavy stock. Now the difference that you're going to see right away is I notice that my ink starts to wick a little bit more, right? So you'll see that when you stamp it, it's still going to stamp. It's still going to be waterproof, but as it's drying, it's soaking into that paper more, which means that my image, to my eye, looks a little bit more blurry, right? Do you guys see that side by side? You're going to notice that in every single color. It's not the color, it's just the paper. That when you're stamping on an uncoated paper, and this could be Neenah cardstock, anything. Here's a tip. If you are stamping an image with detail in any kind of ink, and you want the detail to be as crisp as possible, dry your ink with a heat tool immediately. Because the less time you give that ink to permeate or soak into the surface, the more crisp the detail will stay, right? So if you stamp it and dry it, you'll get crisp detail, but if you stamp it and let it air dry, it's going to soak into the paper until it's completely dry, and that is where you kind of give up a lot of that inside detail. Like you can see kind of inside the petals, how it's just a little thicker. It's not terrible, right? Can you watercolor with Distress ink? Not with Distress ink, but with Archival, yes, because that's waterproof. So we'll get into craft. Now craft, very similar to the white I just shared. It's just craft, a little bit more detail because this is more of a fibrous paper. So I still see some nice detail, but man, how great is that color on craft, right? See, Hickory Smoke is that instant ghost color. So if you want a great background, you can stamp in Hickory Smoke on craft and then stamp your main image in black or do embossing. I mean, wow, that's cool. Mixed media, also love it. So mixed media heavy stock, same thing. It's an uncoated paper. So it is going to give us a little bit of that wicking. All of these were just air dry because I didn't want to cheat. I could have had all these look just as crisp if I dried it with a heat tool, right? But I just wanted to show that if you just stamp and let it air dry, okay, and Archival takes a few minutes to air dry because it's oil-based, and seconds if you're going to use a heat tool. Then we get into specialty stamping. What? Shut up. Come on. Okay. Paper matters. So let's take a look at the rows, right? You see all the, and that's why I chose these images. I mean, you're like, why didn't you choose one of the new ones? Because the image, that's where it matters, right? You can see how the detail completely changes from the paper. And I'll even show you just kind of that side by side. If we just take, see the difference? Of course. So a coated paper, whether it was glossy paper or specialty. The reason I like specialty is because it gives you a little bit more working time. I don't do much on glossy paper unless it's, say, alcohol ink, because glossy paper is the most porous paper you own. So if you try to watercolor on glossy, it's just going to grab that color and it's not going to want to give it back. This is a matte coat, so it does have some play time, but because it's coated, now you understand why the image is so crisp in detail. Because it's coated, my ink is sitting on the coating. It's not soaking into an uncoated paper. And that's why there are so many different papers. It depends on what you want to do. Now, Distress Specialty Stamping, can you do oxide? Can you do ink? Can you do blending? Yes, you can do all of those things. But it is coated, so it's going to work differently than an uncoated paper. But depends on what you're going for, right? And I'll just quickly go through the other colors because same rules apply. There's our watercolor, not bad at all on this one. You can see here, this is the uncoated. We don't get nearly as much wicking as we did on hickory smoke because hickory smoke is a lighter color. So lighter colors, in order to make a dye lighter, there's more fluid and or water in that ink. And so the wetter the ink, the lighter the colors, the more they want to migrate. Whereas the darker the color, you're going to see that they stay a little crisper. Ooh, look at that. Whoa, vintage photo on craft. On mixed media heavy stock, nice. And there is our specialty stamping. So even if we go back to the watercolor version, which is nice, look at the difference in not only the detail, but the color intensity, right? We get more color intensity because it's sitting on a coated paper. Now, I'm not trying to tell you that now if you're going to use archival, you only have to work on coated paper. Gosh, no, that's not it at all. You're going to see that I use it on tags and everything else. I'm just saying that if you are coloring specific and you have an image, let's say it's a photo image that you want the best detail, play around with different papers to achieve the look you ultimately want. Because this is ground espresso on watercolor paper. This is stunning. This is perfect, right? This is amazing. And there's not much difference when you go on to coated. Doesn't look too bad even on that uncoated heavy stock. Really shows up on craft, right? You can see the difference. I'll get these out of order. You can see the difference when I talked about why I wanted ground espresso as a brown, right? If you want a brown to be in the background, vintage photo is your jam. But if you want to stamp and you want that image to be brown on brown and really show up, ground espresso is going to be your jam. Totally different than what black soot would look like. There's our heavy stock, and of course, there is our specialty stamping. And now we're going to jump into, look at that, black soot, beautiful, black printing on there, no shade or tone of blue. When you get onto that white, because that white is a little bit more vibrant than watercolor, we can see the black is even darker. Whoa, you can definitely see that on craft. And then of course on mixed media, we've got that nice black image. And then we finish with just that crisp, where it almost just looks like a laser print, you know, a photocopy of a stamped image because, well, specialty stamping. You can see all the engraving. So you do you. You still have to kind of pick and choose what it is you're going for. So there's not one right paper for that ink. It is what are you as the maker trying to achieve. So the question I get asked a lot in addition to stamping over alcohol ink backgrounds is what ink do you stamp over an ink or an oxide background? Because if you do a lot of backgrounds with Distress Oxide that create that oxidized finish and you try to stamp with a regular Distress ink, it often gets overpowered, right? The oxide comes to the surface. But take a look at this. This is archival. Now you're still going to get that oxidation. The oxide is still going to want to do what it's supposed to do, but our image is certainly detailed. Now this is a textured tag. This is a tag that I did in a previous demo and I stamped on the textured tag. So it didn't really matter because you can still get that great detail because we're stamping in archival ink. That's going to stick to the paper, the grit paste, the crayon, anything you put it over the top of. That is why I like to use this as my top layer, my stamping, because it doesn't matter what's underneath. I know that the oil base of this ink is going to go right over the top of everything. And it's just cool. I mean, again, take a look at the detail. That is why I chose these particular images. I didn't want all smoke and mirrors and go, oh, look how nice this stamps with like a nice bold outline. Well, thanks, Captain Obvious. I get that. But detail, that's really where you can see how that ink formulation is going to hold up, right? And not everybody wants that detail. Not everybody really cares because maybe you don't work with detailed stamps. But that is the joy of the archival formulation that Ranger has. They have so many other colors, so there's nothing unique about this formula that is different than Ranger's archival. So if you love archival or if you're new to archival, check out the other colors. Ranger has an entire palette, their own palette of colors that are not in anybody else's palette. And there's some just absolutely beautiful ones. So definitely check those out if you love this kind of ink. For me as a stamper, those are my go-tos. Everything else is a background, but occasionally I'm doing a holiday tag or I want something where I want a little touch of color that's going to be permanent. And that's why I like having these. And I do plan to expand the palette of archival minis. So there'll be more colors of Distress in the mini formulation, but I don't plan to do any colors in the large pad. Please, 5 years for this, that was enough for me. All right. So let's do just a quick side-by-side demo, just so you can see it in action, just so you kind of understand, because maybe you're hearing oil and water and all that, and do you really understand, is it really different? Okay, so let's take This is just regular black soot Distress ink. I got a stamp. Actually, I'm going to use one of the new ones. Why not? We'll just take this guy off. Having time to prime that up. Okay. Speaking of prime, yeah, gosh, that was a good segue, Holtz. I didn't even mean to do that. You may have seen or heard in videos before where I talk about priming stamps, right? You get a brand new stamp, whether it's a rubber stamp or a clear stamp. I often like to just go over this with a little archival like I'm doing right now. Just rub that on there and I let it dry on the stamp. And then you can go in and clean and you can do whatever you want with the stamp, even if you're using lighter colors. But I find that starting with a layer of just black archival ink, you could use really any color, but I just prefer black, that's going to kind of seal the stamp, if you will, and you could still clean it and use it for yellow and pink and everything else. Let's talk about cleaning. Can you clean this ink off with water? You cannot. Why? Waterproof. There you go. Waterproof. You can't do it. So what do you clean it with? Well, if you need to clean your stamp and you need to clean it with something other than water, I'll tell you about it. But when I'm done with my inks, okay, I'll just spray it with a little bit of water. I'll wipe off whatever's going to come off, right, just with a soft cloth. And you can see that, well, nothing's coming off because the ink is, anyone? Mario? Waterproof. There you go. So it's not going to come off with water, but it's on there. And so any ink that I use that is not archival, so let's say I'm going to stamp with Distress ink, anything water-based, it's not going to re-wet this black, okay? It's not going to re-wet it regardless. But if I'm going to use another color of archival will re-wet this. So let's say I wanted to stamp this stamp in Vintage Photo. If I were to ink this stamp that has black on it with Vintage Photo, would it damage this ink pad? No. But would this Vintage Photo pick up some of the black? Yes. So that could actually be a cool technique in and of itself. So don't think you always have to kind of clean it up. But if you wanted it clean because you want a nice, true color of any other permanent ink you have, Ranger does make an archival cleaner. It's a very simple cleaner. It doesn't have a horrible smell to it. It's just got a dabber top. Now, it's a fabric dabber, so that doesn't make it a scrubber. So you don't ever scrub. You're just going to dab some of the cleaner onto your stamp, just dabbing it. You don't scrub it, otherwise that fabric comes right off for those that may have it. And then you're just going to take, I'll just take a clean part of the cloth, and then you're just going to go in and you're going to clean the stamp, okay? Just wiping off that archival that's on the stamp, okay? Oh, what do you know? The ink came off with cleaner, right? So it's waterproof, but the cleaner is what's going to take it off your stamp if you want a clean stamp. Now, anytime I clean my stamps, I still go back in with a little blast of water. Why? Because all stamp cleaners, everybody's stamp cleaner on the market has conditioners in it. So it's got whatever it is that takes off the ink, and then it has conditioners to keep the rubber or the polymer kind of hydrated. But I don't like leaving it on the stamp because to me it leaves a funky residue. And then when I go to, let's just say, ink it with Distress ink, my ink beads up over the top of it. Why? Well, because I left pretty much a layer of conditioner. That'd be like, I guess, putting conditioner in your hair and not rinsing it out. It'd be a little greasy. So that's why I just go in with water and just wipe that off with a cloth. And now you have a clean stamp. All right. So let's just do, there was a little basics right there. I liked that. Okay, I'm going to start with just Distress ink. And I'm going to ink that up. So tap, tap, tap. Get nice coverage on there. This is a very thin lined stamp. So you want to make sure that you try to cover as much as you can. I'm going to work on Distress watercolor. I'm not going to work on the texture side. I'm going to stamp on the smooth side. The reason I'm going to stamp, let's just go this way. The reason I want to stamp on the smooth side is because if you have a detailed stamp, and you could use a stamping tool. If I was doing this because it actually mattered, I would definitely use a stamping tool, but just for the sake of the demo, a grid block is going to give me good pressure. So there's our detailed stamp. Next, I'm going to go in with archival. Do I need to clean this off? No, but if it makes you feel good to do it, no problem. That's why I always like to have just a towel because it's very simple. If you have a stamp chamois or something, you can just wipe that off. And then I will go in with my archival and do the same thing. And a lot of times when I'm working with a stamp, see, I just like to kind of move the stamp around if you can. I mean, you can certainly move your hand, but you want to make sure that you get this nice and ink. Tap, 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 not rubbing. Rubbing was only just to prime it. To stamp with it, you want to tap that ink off of the ink pad just to get a nice coverage. And we're just going to stamp this. I'll try to do pretty close, okay? And we're going to stamp that as well. right next to our black soot, just stamp with purpose, which means hold, give some pressure, and lift it off. All right. So from a side-by-side black soot to black soot, it's pretty consistent. This one is a little bit darker only because of the oil, right? But this one's going to wick a little different. So once these are stamped, just going to spray with water. There you go. That's clean in my world. Put that back on the carrier sheet. All right. If you're going to watercolor, anytime you're going to stamp in a permanent ink, doesn't have to be archival, but anytime, a good idea is just dry it, right? Now, how do you know if it's dry? Well, this one you can't really touch to tell if it's dry because you really won't know. But a few seconds with a heat tool, any kind of heat tool, is just going to ensure that it's dry. It doesn't take long to dry. Really, on an uncoated paper, it's probably seconds. But it's just a good rule of thumb because, you know, sometimes it may be humid in your area, and of course that's going to impact drying time if there's humidity. And if you try to do that, you might just end up with, well, you know, a blurry watercolored image. All right, so we've got both of these inks stamped, this, and then we're just going to take some Distress inks. I'm not going to go into a full color. I'm just going to choose a few. Let's go in with a little bit of picked raspberry. I'm just smashing some right onto the palette part of this travel mat. If you have a regular glass media mat, the larger one, go for it. But this, I'm just squishing some color on there just so I have some to play. Okay, you can use crayons, you can use really whatever it is that you want to use. But I just want to pick some light colors and some dark colors just to show you. We'll throw in even a little peacock feather. There we go. And I think back here I'm just going to do a little tumbled glass. Okay. I love having those squares because that just allows me to take a mini ink pad, smash it in. The white glass acts as a light source. It doesn't light up, but it acts as that so I can see what colors are what. Okay. So first we're just going to take a water brush. You can also take a paintbrush. And if you're going to do watercolor, you can pick up your color and you can go in and just start watercoloring, right? And so we can just be as just kind of fun and free with the colors as we want. The nice thing about Distress, it is reactive with water. It's going to maintain its color integrity. So that's just going to allow you to just continue to blend and mix that color, right? If we want to just pick up, I don't know, we'll pick up a little bit of green over here. We can go in, if you want to color outside the lines, you do you, right? You can kind of do whatever it is you want. I'm going to pick up a little bit of yellow, right? We'll even go in there. And I just wipe off my brush on the glass just to get some of that color off the bristles. Whenever I'm watercoloring, I just try to make sure that I don't get in the habit of always wiping this off on a cloth. If you do that on a cloth, then pretty much you're taking the water out of a water brush, and a water brush is designed, this is the Distress water brush. Many water brushes are designed to have like self-feed. Can you see that in my hand? It just has a little bit of moisture that comes out of the bristles. It doesn't pour the water out. If you have a brush that pours the water out, you want to get a new water brush because it's not what we want, all right? So there we go, just some random colors. Again, I'm not going to go and color all this in. I just wanted to share that when you're working over archival, right, the color is just going to maintain regardless. Now, if it's just Distress, because people say, well, what if I watercolor over Distress? Well, that's really not going to work for you because Distress, well, it's water reactive. And so if you go over that with a color, I'm just trying to clean my brush in between. I'm just following the same colors that I did before. That's really not going to, you might like that. This might be your jam. You might be like, I am now going to be a grunge colorer, and that's okay. But just know that it's going to react that ink, okay? And you might think, oh, but wait a minute, what if I seal this? What if I put microglaze down, whatever? Well, if you do that, you're also going to seal the paper to the point that it won't watercolor properly. So that's the big difference. That's why if you are a colorer or you want to create watercolor, stamping in a waterproof ink is key to that, okay? We want to maintain that integrity versus trying to watercolor with your Distress ink or your oxide. Your oxide would do exactly the same thing this one is going to do, right? So that's why there is archival in our world, and that is why I want archival in my Distress world, because there's oftentimes that I want to either stamp over background or color, but I want the palette of my permanent ink to really work with the palette of Distress. Okay, so that's it. That's what that's all about. Just gonna wipe this off. And that was the the quick demo, the quick color comparison, and now we're going to get into the amazing makes of this release. So hopefully just that would be, you know, sometimes just seeing that visual, you're like, bing, got it, right? Now I get the difference between an oil-based ink and a water-based ink, and why I want a permanent ink, and why when I was trying to color, no matter what I did, it was a hot mess. Hopefully all those things just spark, because as a maker, man, I wish when I started out that there were more people just sharing the basics than before. I think, gosh, back in the day, you couldn't get anyone to share the details. It was like, here's what I do, and yeah, I'm not going to say nobody. There were still certain people in the industry that would share what they did, and man, those were my favorites. All right, let me just move this out of the way real quick. Get this out. Perfect. Get this. Get this. All right, because I need to have room for the magic of the makers. So I want to do a shout out really to all of the makers. I will have a follow-up blog post, hopefully today, if not today, by tomorrow. There's a lot of makes to share and showcase for you guys, and I will have all the makers linked by name, also have their photos on there, the thumbnails of all of the cards that they did. I know that a lot of the makers are planning their own blog posts and tutorials, so you're going to see some social sharing in the coming months. The links on the website do get updated with when the makers post a tutorial. So if the photo on my website is not linked, that means there's no tutorial, and if it is, there is. So thanks, Zoe, for help with that. All right, let's get into the makes. You guys ready? First, we're going to just do it by stamp set. I think it's just easier that you can see what you can do with a stamp set. Because let's face it, sometimes you look at a stamp set and you're like, meh, right? But then when you see a make, you're like, oh, hold on, bring that back. So this one is all about floral outlines, and you are going to see in these makes that they've incorporated several other things, maybe a little ideology, maybe another stamp set, whatever they have, all right? So we're going to go in, we're going to start off with Colbert. She just did this beautiful, beautiful card using that, and this is what I was saying about mixed media, where you can color outside the lines, you can just wick that distress like crazy, and get the most stunning color because that image lends itself to that, right? That image is going to allow all of that color to flow. You can add a little bit of, this is a little Field Notes Ephemera from Ideology, or one of the Small Talk stickers. You can do some text or some splatter, but a beautiful pop of color from that card, right? It's just stunning, absolutely beautiful. And you can create so many different effects. Juliana created this with an image. This one is just embossed in gold. Can you see that little bit of embossing? That's another nice thing about having these outlines, is that you can emboss them, and because they're so thin, they don't fill in the gaps, and that allows you to then go in and watercolor inside. That creates kind of that barrier. Still do some stamping on the outside, some splattering. This is a tiny text stamp. So again, a lot of images will give you the ability to use previous images, ideology, whatever that is. That's kind of that to me is the importance of any kind of stamp, really. All right, Emma created this card. Beautiful, love the layers of this. You know, when you're taking watercolor panels and you're die cutting and you're stacking, this one's also embossed, very much colored inside the lines. I can't do that, but you certainly, I mean, that's the beauty of this, that even though it's a loose design, it doesn't mean you have to always just kind of go crazy. You can stay in there. There's that observations. You'll see those quotes pop into a lot of different things, but such a great card, right? I love seeing that wallpaper scrap from Ideology, and just a whole different aesthetic to that stamp set. And you're going to see it, really. You're going to see everything from really beautiful and colorful and vibrant to even kind of a mixed media effect. So this is Barbara. Barbara created this. So check this out. This is what I thought was so cool. Stamping this and not coloring the flowers. Really stamp those and color everything around it, right? Whether you can just stay away from that, or you could stamp it and maybe do a little distress microglaze to create a resist, and then you can paint over it. But how great is that? So even if you're not a colorer, right, we can go in and say, here's the ink, and we can do a background, and there's our image. So if you don't like to specifically color in the images, this is a great idea for using that. And there you're going to see the bold sayings right there. Really just a great way that you can pull out the detail if you're into backgrounds. Love that. Just a cool card, right? I think that's really important. So Zoe created these, Zoe in Italy. what I liked about this is that to me, they had a very similar vibe to it, right? You can see the stencil in the background, you can even see the color, but using the image is different. Remember when I talked about perspective, that you could use the image as a whole, as a centerpiece, because they're scaled, they'll fit right on a card front, or you can take an image and you can stamp it off of the edge and create a totally different effect, a totally different background. And I loved both of these cards for that reason, because it showcased that perfectly. It could be an image, or it could be off the edge as a background. And of course, that's going to highlight, that's just stamped on vellum and embossed, that bold saying, and just really cool. And there's a little bit of the stencil in the back. You see that city, right? That when you look at it, you're like, okay, it's a city map, but no, it's really almost like crackle or fragments of color. Just really, they're just great cards. Beautiful way to showcase that. And so many, I mean, to me, it's just so many different effects, right? So Kath created this card just doing almost like a kissing technique on the back with some inks, just using, that's a Vicky Boutin term, that kissing. Taking those inks and just leaving a lot of that space open, and then stamp that loose image over the top, right? Because that really makes it look like you just kind of sketch that out with pen. I love just how, I don't know, I like the aesthetic of that stamp set. So hopefully you're seeing some many different ways. If you're a color, if you just want to do it over the background, just think it's very cool. And I love that little ideology label sticker, just great, right? Nice, very simple, right? Simplicity, very cool. Now this one, Jen Shirkus, she loves to do that no line watercolor. So again, taking the images, taking the stamp, but then kind of creating your own watercolor by just stamping that. Absolutely beautiful. So amazing. This technique, I'm not a good colorist, so I would never even attempt this technique, but it's so great to see people use an image, stamping that in a light color of Distress ink, and then when you go in and color, the lines just kind of dissolve and disappear. But I like that this image really lends itself to that, because it does give it such a beautiful organic vibe. And again, you can see those quotes. You'll see both the bold and all of the other quotes just kind of pop in throughout the cards. Isn't that cool? So when it comes to different effects or different looks, one of the things that I think is so amazing to the makers, and that's why I love the makers, is every maker that creates for a release has their own skill set, their own look, their own vibe. And I'm so grateful that every time they celebrate that, they do them. They don't try to do each other. They're like, I don't want it to look like that. They want it to look like them. And that is why you can see so many different ideas. So Yuko created this card. I love how dark and moody this is, right? Compared to, say, Jen's style, which is, colorful and vibrant. That to me is so important that you can see that by stamping in those dark colors. I see a little aged mahogany in there, but stamping those out and just watercoloring a little bit, right? So if you're stamping in Distress, you're able to get a lot of that ink just to bleed. And so Yuko just always surprises me with just that whole look. Again, simplicity. I love that. Simplicity, yet very complex in the fact that when you're stamping with colors, touching it with just a little water, you're going to get that distress to wick and pool, and then you're done with that. It's great. Now, I'm so excited that we have a new maker on the team, and that is Natifa, Juicy Christians. You know that I'm a huge fan. If you don't follow her, man, all the envelopes that she shares day after day, she just has her own look and vibe to creating envelopes, and I wanted that part of the launch. So just a shout out to Tifa for that. I love this. And so here she did her envelopes, her amazing envelope art, using not only the images, there's that stamped image, but take a look at this envelope that kind of looks, as I mentioned, kind of like Big Crackle, because it's got paste that's to it. I wish you could feel it, right? Like Feel-O-Vision. So it looks like really chunky crackle, but that is that city map stencil. But I love the envelope because I love the flowers in there. It almost looks like a black light painting. I love the pop of color over a vellum scene. But see, if you're into envelope art, if you're into art journaling, if you're into any of that, that's the cool thing about a stamp set. Stamps, dies, anything that has a strong image, you as the maker, you're the one that gives it life. You are the one that brings it into your world to do what you do with it. And that's what I hope always, that these videos inspire you to be that. Right? Where you look and you're like, oh, I'm not that person. I can never color because I can't watercolor. But that doesn't mean that I can't use this, because like this technique, it's like, I could totally do that. I could stamp in brown, using it in parts and pieces to create envelope art. why not? It doesn't always have to be a card. I just think it's stunning, and I love all the layering and details of that. Just amazing, right? So amazing. Another person that just loves pop of color is Sharon, and I love both of these cards. It's like a slimline. Maybe this is even a mini slimline. Not really caught up on the whole lingo of the slimline world, but it's a skinny card, so I'm going to call it a slimline. But I like the fact of using that image, any of the images, on repeat. Create your own background pattern, right? Take those images and stamp and just move them around to create a background. Coloring with oxides on craft or doing some embossing glaze, you can see that wonderful shine. So this is colored, believe it or not, with Distress embossing glaze. You can see that shine just using an embossing pen and then the ink in the background, or stamped on craft and then watercolored with oxide. But just take a look not only of the color and the different technique, but also having those bold sayings, right? When you see it as a set, often you look at those words, let me just grab that set in, and you're like, whoa, obnoxious. I'm not shouting my cards. Well, no, you're not, but if you're trying to create effects on your card, you definitely want some type of text or saying that's going to balance out whatever background you want to create. So I love that. I love that it could be on cardstock or over vellum. Just beautiful. Now we're going to get into some interesting effects. These cards that just kind of made me go, what? Wow. It has a totally different vibe. So this is another card that Yuko created. This one, I swear, I thought it was just wood burning. I thought she went in and used a wood burning tool, but no, it's just paper. But I just think it's fascinating to me. The colors stamped on there and then just bled out. I mean, it's so cool. I would love to see a tutorial on this because it's fascinating to me. Doesn't it look like just burnt wood? It really does. And I think that the line art of that really captures that look, because if you ever try to do wood burning, you know, you have to have a pretty steady hand. So I think those little squiggly wigglies on there really are perfect for that effect. Beautiful. So Yuko, like, that's just, I know I still like touch that thinking it's going to be texture, and I'm like, nope, it's a piece of card, right? Really cool. Really cool. And then Vicky, dig that crazy chick. Very industrial vibe. So when I saw this, I'm like, what? All right, take a look at this card. So this is done on metallic craft stock, right? So if you see that, stamped and embossed, but she went in, maybe I'm guessing with a little steel wool, scratching, did something, but here's what made me really happy when I saw this card. Look at this little note. Blog post. It means she's going to do a blog tutorial on this. I can't wait for it, because look at that. Those flowers, they're stamped and embossed on there, but it really looks like it's just etched or engraved on metal, right? Isn't that cool? A little bit of tiny attacher just to add some metal elements, but totally took the vibe of like pretty colorful flowers into much more of an industrial kind of steampunk vibe. And I love the pop of color over black metallic. Like, wow. All right. Now, when it comes to pop of color, I'm a huge fan of this next guy, Alberto. So thank you for creating for this live. If you don't follow him, he's got mad coloring skills with Copic, and take a look at just how intense and vibrant that is. Like his skills, like look at those little sparkles and stuff he adds to the coloring. Just absolutely stunning. So even, and what I really liked about this is that his coloring like took something that was very scribbly, and he was able to kind of, I don't know, like make it whole, like make it, you know, where it had sense, right? So you see like how scribbly that is. But yeah, I'm not sure how he did, but he was able to just kind of fill in the lines to where the image actually looks clean and crisp, because, well, that's his style. And that's also really what was so inspiring from the challenge, is that he took an image that's very distressed and made it work with his style because of his skill set. The same way Tifa did with the envelopes. I think that's what's really important to remember about that. So yeah, one more peek at that. I mean, come on, you guys. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. All right. You know, I love me a good like technique that you can do multiples of. So Anita created these cards. It's always great to know that as a maker, if you create something that you're like, I really like this, do it again. Repetition is a beautiful thing. So if you're kind of in your groove and you create something, you're like, dang, I like the way that looks. Make several of them. Make a few of them. This way you have those at the ready when you need that card, because you love that technique. Not everything has to be a one of one. It is still handmade. And I love the idea that when you're creating this, you can kind of find your rhythm, find your groove to create a background. I love how she used those flowers to create those pops of color over that stripe background. And then of course, using those bold sayings just embossed in gold, right? So you've got a birthday card and a thank you card, boom, ready. So that's a thing to keep in mind as well when you're working with this, that maybe you're inspired by fashion or an advert or a look and you want to replicate that look, do it. But you don't have to just do it once. You can just create that. And that is exactly what Stacy did as well when it came to these cards. She was playing around with a watercolor technique that she shared. I'm sure she'll be doing a tutorial as well. Actually stamping with wetter inks to create beautiful backgrounds. But to me, it totally transformed this image. I don't even see it as like a flower set. I mean, sure, there's flowers there, but because of how loose and wet and watercolory this is, very dreamy, it totally changes. And then the same technique in a different palette just gives a completely different look to that stamp set, right? To go from very organic nature earth tones to also just beautiful watercolory effects. And whether you're stamping with ink pads or stamping with stain or stamping with archival, when you're in that mode, you're in that zone, that's the beauty of that, is just to start playing around with different colors, and then you can create backgrounds, cut them up, die cut through them, do all of your thing. But I love that the idea, the concept, the layout of the card is very similar, but using different things, right? This one, she's got, a stamp with some buttons and some ribbon. This one, she used a die cut and a stamp, but also just some buttons and some other cuts. But beautiful, right? Just so, yeah, dreamy. Just they are dreamy. I agree, Tifa. They are. Paula shared the same thing. She did a very cool idea and then transformed it into two completely different cards. So both of these cards, right? If you look at the cards, and I'll just take the card right now and I'm going to do this. You ready? Okay. So if you're even looking at this from a layout perspective, so look at the stamp layout. Same, right? But by completely changing the perspective and doing something different, you created a completely different look. So both of these cards Paula created, I'm just going to kind of tip that. Take a look at that beautiful detailed embossing. So like for a wedding card, whew, stunning. Simplicity. You take those images, you layer them, you stamp them, and these can all be placed together, right? So these three stamps could be, I'm just guessing how she did it. I'm not really sure, but you could essentially put all of these, say, on a platform and stamp them at one time to create your background, right? Because they're just different flowers to kind of intersect and create a beautiful, beautiful background. Then you pair it, I love this, Sizzix die. This is that alphanumeric, I love that bold. And then just adding a keyword and then taking some tiny text. So there's a love with all your heart, but then taking the same idea, so there's that gold embossing, but this time just going in, doing a little watercolor. Now you've got a card for a friend, right? So take something elegant that could be wedding, and then you go in and do that little bit of metallic for the die cut. But to me, like the finishing touch, because it's all about the details, with Paula, take a look around the edge of the card, right? Can you guys see that? It's the decal trimmer, right? So my tonic decal trimmer, do you see that along the bottom edge? That is the beauty of the decal trimmer. And I know with the decal trimmer being out, there's a love-hate relationship. Some people wanted it to be like a sawtooth. Well, sorry, denied. That didn't happen. It is, I mean, they did. They just expected it to be like jaggedy from start to finish. And as I explained, like I want subtle areas where there's like no decal, a little bit of decal, smooths out, but that's really what the trimmer can provide, is look at that edge. That looks like a torn edge, but it isn't. It's cut. It's cut with that trimmer. So just beautiful. I love seeing that. Thanks. I agree, Nita. But really, trust me, I've seen on the internet, it's a love-hate where people are like, they expect it to be like zigzag, jig-jag from the top to the bottom. And that just, well, that's not what I did. But that's all right.
I could use one of my saws.
There you go. You can do that. All right. So the final cards for this set, these are from Tammy B. Again, repetition with an idea, but so clever in how this is done. So let me I'll break one card down, then I'll show it. So I love the idea of just having that stamped image on cardstock and then over a tinted background. But when it's watercolored, it's almost like, black and white television, color television, right? But it's still watercolored. So she did watercolor in neutrals, in grayscale, top and bottom, but then watercolored within color on this strip of cardstock, right? Can you guys see that? So there is that definite break, and then just stitched on there and a little splatter. But that look, that ability to just kind of highlight that pop of color and then have that watercolor. I guess I've not seen people watercolor in black or gray. And I think probably that's the thing that really, really caught my eyes. I'm like, hold on, that's kind of like, how did you get that image just to be so, not just an outline, but definitely a black and white image versus a color. So I think just seeing those 3 cards with that effect, there you go. Even if you don't want to color the entire thing, I think adding a pop of color or just having like part of your card as if, you know, that's the color television and the black and white television, but then throwing some of that splatter on the outside margins, that also detailed, man, right?
Perfect stitching.
These, I know,
So
yeah,
perfect.
I can't really do, I can do a little sewing, but yeah.
Doesn't look like that.
Doesn't look like that, but I try. I do love it. But there you go, one set, just one set so far, 1 of 5. But you can see how these makers have just absolutely knocked it out of the park, right? From industrial to wood burning to vivid, vibrant to envelope art to just, there's so many beautiful ideas and ways, and that to me is the power of the makers, right? The fact that they just remain in that confidence of being true to them and doing their style, because that inflection, that whole little bit of their style is what brings all these sets to life for all of us. So beautiful. That is set 1. Like, yeah, so different. I agree, Michelle. So amazing from a stamp set, right? Because you look at this, you're like, oh, flowers. Really? Okay. Well, there's going to be more. I'm going to set these over here. Thanks, Mario. All right. So next up, we're going to go and let me grab this next set so I can have it in here. We're going to put a little mod cactus. I told you this was a doozy from a live, but hey, it's inspiration. You can always come back and watch the replay if you can't stay for it, all right? So the whole idea behind this set, as I mentioned, is that it has a positive, a solid image, and then that doodly outline. Now, you can do a lot of different things with it, but its main intention is this, that you can create a card where you stamp in a solid color, and then you offset it with that archival ink by stamping in the archival, and that gives you a very cool, very modern look. Now, these are 2 cute little cards that Paula created using the set. Notice the background, the stencils, right? So see how I was saying that like the design of these stencils, all of them, you're going to see them used for a lot of different stamp sets, that even the dots and even these really play well with the stamp designs, believe it or not. You know, when I first showed them, you're like, weird, rainbow polka dots and a city map? That seems rather odd. Yeah, well, so far they've worked. And that's what I love to do when I design for Stampers Anonymous, is I like to make things that don't necessarily make sense, but I know creatively they're going to work really well together. But how cool is that background? I love, Paula loves to work on the diagonal. So I like the fact, and I know this is the mini scale of that, but just to show you from like the big one, even though this is gridded, remember turning that on, there we go, on that diagonal is what's going to give you a whole different pattern, right? Great cards. And I like the fact that these have what I would consider kind of a vintage palette, a nice vintage vibe. And you can have that. That's the thing. When it comes to these cactus, you can be as vivid and bold as you want. Sharon created this one. Look at those pops of color. And again, taking an image and creating background paper. That's what it's all about. You have stamps for just that. Can you buy pattern paper? Sure. But can you create your own? Yes, even better. And you can see how simple it is that you don't have to color the same thing. So like on this one, Paula just inked the stamp the same color. Great, because it looks perfect, because the stamp is designed to break it up. That's what that little accent on the pots technically does. It kind of breaks your eye from here to here. Otherwise it would look just kind of like an exclamation point. But because they're spaced out, it also gives you the ability to color the different elements when you stamp it. So there is no right or wrong. They both look good, whichever way. Now these little flowers, these were really designed to be add-ons, right? And that's why I put them in the set at the bottom. They are so tiny that I really connected 2 of the flowers on each one. Could you cut them apart? Yes, but I'll tell you what, they're really hard to stay on the block. So I would just put that on the block and then just ink one or the other. But again, you do you. But that's really how I kind of thought those through, because it does allow you to go in and just add those little accents, little flower, and you can see the text. I told you, you're going to see text from different stamp sets popping up. So that's from Inquisitive. So you got what's up. It's great, right? So much fun. I love that. So Kath created this card with the cactus. Again, you see the layers. I love the colors. I love seeing all the different flowers. If you are a Sizzix fan and you have any alphabets, whether they're stickers or dies, create your own sentiment. I love that. Let's stick together. A couple of favorites on here as well. This is a stamp set that I did a long time ago. I think it might be called Brushstrokes. It's a bunch of solids. There's solid circles, solid kind of rectangular things, but they're all brushstrokes. So when I say solid, it's not a perfect circle. It's got all these little wispies, but I love how she stamped that for the sun. And remember when I talked about the stencil, right? When I said, if you're working with this and you don't want to do the rainbows because you think they're rainbows or whatever, you just stencil the part you want to use. And look at how perfect that is as that bottom of the card, right? So good. So good. So Nico created this tag. I love that. So many details. So we've got the tag, and this is what I was saying about the image. Just because it comes with both of these does not mean you have to use both of them together. That's what you've seen so far, but you can certainly just stamp the line art and then go in and color it. There's nothing wrong with that. You go in and do all of your coloring. You can do your watercolor. I love how he dimensionalized the pots, right? So stamp them, just do a little foam tape and raise that. Here you can see the gears used at the bottom. What a great pattern for that. And I love the colors of this. I love that it's got vintage, but I love the pops of color. But that just shows that you can just stick with the outline and do that as well, right? I know, I agree. You're like, I don't know why the cactus is so cute, but they are. That's the thing. There is just something about the cactus, but I like that they're quirky or kind of whimsy. So I didn't untie this until now because I haven't seen the rest of these. So these are from Zoe. Zoe Hillman, just like love this little set. Look at how so cute. All right. So take a look at this whole little set, right? So we got little cards. Oh my gosh. Stamped on little matching envelopes. Stop it right now. Oh my heck. All right. Look at this little series. I'm going to go through one by one. All right. Now I see what you did. Oh my gosh. So each one has that little cactus that is watercolored on the front. So you can see that. It's stamped, but then very beautiful, loose watercolor. I love the little splattery, speckly. And then look at this. I said speckly just now. That's a new one. That's a new one. I love, again, seeing that, right? So you good on there, stamped from the Inquisitive set, but then the envelope just stayed clean, right? Meaning just doing the solid and the outline. So cute, Zoe. Talk about sewing. Come on. All right. But what's cute is look at these little dies. So these dies, I see these as from the Sizzix die set, right? So if you have the funky cactus, wow, that was lucky. I didn't plan that, but I'm glad that they kind of are proportionate, that the die cuts from that Sizzix funky cactus will work on these stamped images. Bravo, Zoe. Look at that. I know, it's what, and she's close to the edge, man. She walks on the edge right there. No way. I love that. I love the details of this. You see what I mean? Like, you can totally sit down and just make a set of note cards or gift cards for someone, and you're giving them cards that they can give out to their friends, whether it's birthday, how old, what's up. I mean, so cute. But I love all the detail. Yeah, it's the first time I see it. I don't like to look at the makes before the live. If this is your first live, it's another thing that I do. All the makes come in. Mario works with the makers and Paula to make sure it gets shipped here, and they, send photos to Paula, and Mario unpacks it all. But I don't like to go through them until the live because I like to be as surprised as you. I think that's great. I'll save that little ribbon. I'll tie them back up. Those, absolutely charming. So cool. Then this, you could tell Natifa had my heart because, hello, we live in Arizona. I love that it's like that old greetings from Arizona. I have so many questions on this envelope. So first, I love that it's Arizona. Love that. I love that it's got just those dots. So it's just kind of like that marquee sign. I love how the pops of color of the different oxides sit on craft. Love how these cactus are all fussy cut and layered. The greetings from, take a look at that stencil that goes around, right? Very cool to remember that when you're working with a stencil, and the reason I do layering stencils, I understand like in today's world, layering stencil kind of means like put stencil 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and layer them. Well, I've called them layering stencils since I first launched them. And the reason is because it's just a layer, right? And it doesn't mean that it has to be the same size as a card front or as an envelope. It's about going in and saying, okay, I'm going to put some here. Okay, let me turn this and put some here. And that's exactly what Natifa did on this one, is that you can just kind of change and turn it. Someone says, give me a margarita. I hear that. It's absolutely cool. But a big question is inside there. I mean, did you do what I think you did? Which is, did you go in and actually print this or ink it and then cut it out? Because at first I thought, oh, if she didn't like the stencil, she just cut it up and threw it in the envelope. But then I'm like, no, that's a little wider than the stencil, but it looks like you took that pattern and actually hand cut that. Yes. And it's layered over a scene in the back. It's like, what? What the what? That is wild. So cool. I know. So come on. I did this because really I thought, oh, she didn't like that stencil. But that's a good way to use it. If you don't like it, use it as an embellishment. It's what I always say. You don't like something, it's an embellishment. But that's cut in there. Just unbelievable. Yeah, really cool. Just awesome envelope. It is. It's a whole greetings from, right? That's what I love. I do love that. All right, so Cassie created this card. MK Knits. I love that. I love seeing, that's that wonderful moon that I've seen Emma do from, gosh, circa 2013. And I love seeing a technique that just gets used again and again in so many different ways. Stacy did one, you know, where she added that kind of drippy color. So I love seeing that moon idea as a sun. I think that's just absolutely very, very cool. And I think it was the perfect backdrop. I love that hot color that you used, Cassie, especially with those cactus in there. And then again, these little pots, fussy cut. Very cool card. I love seeing all the stitching, right? Take a look at that. Beautiful, beautiful, Cassie. So intense. Love it. Oh, so good. Joy created this card. So much fun. Don't know how you did this one. Not sure. I mean, it's from some alphabets, but those all look kind of hand cut and glossy accents. But very cute to see like you from the bold sayings and then just parts and pieces of an alphabet. But I love the stuck on you. I love the layer on craft. Again, that's the thing, is that these stamps, because they have that solid, you can stamp in a solid color and then stamp in archival over the top to get your detail, and you're good to go. Done. Very cute card. So really need to know about that alphabet because it's neat. I love it. Looks like a ransom note. I think it's fun. And the glossy accents just really made it pop. A lot of fun. And it's funny because, you know, when I see these cards, at first I don't notice it. And then, because when I was sorting these, I had this over in the bold and I'm like, oh, that's cute. Jen Shirkus, you know, mermaid, whatever. And then I saw this and I'm like, what? Yes, cactus, underwater. Get it? So Jen, you know, in her true mermaid style, used the cactus underwater, like little sea plants with the rocks. I thought that was a very clever use for cactus, right? Going from definitely going from extremes to the dry heat and land to put them underwater, and a very clever use. Again, if you know Jen Shirkus, you know that she's all about the color, the teal, underwater mermaids. And so to take something like a cactus and use it her way, that's what's always just super inspiring. And I love that glitter, right? That glitter that just kind of sparkles on that bold. Really clever. Great use for it. I think that's what's always just important is how you're going to use it. So Tammy created this card. Very beautiful. Love the layers over this background. I love seeing that stencil, right? With the little resist, this resist spray or embossed resist, but very cool pattern to go through under that bold sayings. And again, the cactus. And the fun thing about when you're working with these, of course, is that it can be as off register as you want, right? You as the maker can really shift those off. You can try to line them up a little bit. They're not fillers, so they're not proportionate to actually fill it in perfectly, but it's really unique that you can kind of set those apart however you want. I think it's a cool card. I love all the stitching on there, and I love just seeing that vellum, that embossed vellum go across, right? To me, I love seeing the soft palette and then kind of the earthy palette over the top. It's great. So many fun cards, right? For cactus. So many fun cards for cactus. So Anita, should call Anita the trio. Anita the trio. Well, last time it was Anita the duo. So again, multiple ideas. And thanks, Anita, for doing that. She knows how much I love it. So thank you for doing it. Again, love the idea of taking something and just creating with it. So if you see the background, it says prickly, just using, I'm guessing that's an old font. I think this is maybe like a tall text. I think I did this alphabet with Stampers Anonymous to create that. But I love the palette of this. So here's what I want to showcase. Take a look at kind of the watercolor with Oxide, where you're not getting that off-register look. You're definitely getting this more fill in the blanks, but using the Oxide, still using the flowers. I love a little snarky on there, right? I've got a good heart, but this mouth. And then you paired that with that bold, the bold sayings, focus on the good.
Nita said it was tall
right?
text.
Ah, there you go. See, tall text.
Yep.
You know.
You know a thing or two.
Kinda. But that was a long time ago. I haven't used that set in forever, so it was really cool to see. I'm like, I love that font. I'm like, wait a minute, it's a stamp. Forecast for today, unproductive with a chance of a nap. Best day ever. So see, it's very, very clever to not only create this, but to take some elements that you have from other lines and pair this in. Just cute cards, Anita. Love that. I miss you like an idiot misses the point. Hello, my friend. How perfect for the cactus. So good. There you go. I love that. That's a great card to send to a friend, right? Because only your friends would appreciate that. That's the beauty of it. Great ideas. And again, seeing those colored in Oxide just gives it, I don't know, that very Southwest kind of patina look. But I love the look of the embossed paired with the stickers. Just super clever. Super clever. All right, this is the card that I talked about earlier that Tammy created just using the stencil, right, with some paste and the Distress embossing glaze. But look at that. It just really gave it, I love it, gave it such a cool Southwest vibe. Just remind me of like turquoise rock. And I don't know if you guys can see that. I'm trying to get the light to cooperate with me. But that whole background is done with Distress embossing glaze and paste. I'm sure she told me about it. There we go. Yep. Crackle paste, Distress embossing glaze, and spray stain. But that's definitely a lot of work, you know, to go in and do all the coloring, but so worth it because that background, that texture kind of looks like rocks just right over that card. Just beautiful, right? A very, very cool simline, but just I love that background technique as well. And I think that this gave, you know, I've seen that this was a little bit more of kind of a whimsy stencil, but this gave a completely different vibe by the texture and the palette that it was used in. All right. Now, the final one for this set, when I looked at it, I knew right away who it was, but then I was like, that is so freaking clever. And sometimes there's an idea that's so clever that it's just like, oh. All right. So Zoe Hillman created this card. And if you know Zoe Hillman, you know she's got a thing or two for hats. And I love that. And again, in true style, hats on the cactus. Very fitting, Zoe. Guess who? So at first I'm like, wait a minute. Is this like from the... like distinguished? No, it wasn't that. Okay, hold on. And then it hit me. Yep. These guys, their little hats and their mustaches. Zoe went in and did all the fussy cut, stamped and embossed those, cut them out, and put those on the cactus. Hilarious. So good, right? And so Zoe. So that's what I'm saying for these makers. I love how these are kind of masked and layered over the top. But just to look at a stamp set like Zoe did and Jen did, like all the makers did, they took it and they're like, okay, how am I going to make this stamp set me? And some people are like, it's not me, I'm not using it. And that's completely fine. But how brilliantly clever to put the hats and mustaches on those. I love that. But every single idea, you know, from whether you're creating, you know, to me, this is a very industrial kind of steampunk vibe just because of the hats and mustaches, but a very Southwest vibe, a very colorful, but I love the add-on for the snark. I love completely two different looks. Same maker. Tammy did both of these cards. See, depending on your mood, what colors you want to work with, you can create so many different looks from the same sets. Jen created the whole underwater, creating craft and just using different alphabets or different parts of images and using that as a background, creating very Arizona vibe with the cactus. Absolutely love it. Brilliant little gift cards. Love if you're making tag art. I love the idea of always just staying true to what you're doing and using the images how you would use them, right? Coloring, layering, whatever that is. Using with die cuts if you wanted to do that. Creating backgrounds, whatever your thing is, that's what you need to do. And if you are sticking with the vintage palette, I mean, you can see here that these really go from all different gamuts, and they're cactus. They're cactus. Just unbelievable. So again, bravo. I told you guys, it's like just seeing the makes, it's mind-blowing to see all the ideas that happen. That's what it is. Seeing all the ideas that really come out of it. All right. We're into 2 sets, guys. We have 3 more to go. I know. Insert eye roll. It's unbelievable, right? All right. So this next one I can tell is a favorite because look at the basket. There's a lot. So I'm just going to go through and try to grab a chunk at a time and take us through Inquisitive. These guys really have some unbelievable personality, and when you see these makes, that to me is what brings them to life, is the makes. I just think they're hilarious, and hopefully you're going to see from these makes why these elements in this set were incorporated, right? Because I do meet with the makers before they get the stamps just to kind of give them an idea of what was in my head, and then they run with it and they do them. They create their own spin and take on it. So this first card from Emma, I love the idea. Just Emma makes giant cards, and I think it's so cool because it is just a flammable piece of art. I love that tag running across, right? Across the center of that, using kind of this idea, but using the large scale guys for that. Look at the bullseye in the back. I mean, just look at how that's stamped and all of the detail that's in there. You can see in here the gears. So the gears are going to be from Observations, right? So that stamp right there from this set, you can just mix and match. But take a look at how that's just gold embossed down there. You've got the Guess Who and these guys. Such a fun card, but look at that coloring. So much coloring, layering, fussy cutting. Oh my gosh, the hats. I like how these hats on the outside are embossed, so that gives it a little shine. This one isn't, but this one's got a little Ideology metal star. It's all about the details. Little machine heads, just so cool to just take those images and really give them a whole character, a whole different personality. I think that's great. Joy created this, and she knows I like a good action wobbler. See, I know what it is now.
You knew what it was called.
Listen, I prepped. I was like, Joy's going to do a card. I used to call it a thinger. But there you go, action wobbler. And that's just really clever, right? Just having that, such a cool, I love this set because this is what I would just send a friend. Like, hey, you good? Like that's a great set of like, you know, miss you, all that, just really a fun way. And any dies that you have, a great way that you can layer the stamps with a die. So here you can see the bullseye, you can see the stencil in the background with the dots, you can see the plus signs that came with this one. So there again, this stamp has dots, so you can use those, but then we still have that stencil with the pattern. So I told you how those stencils are really going to support all of the stamp sets in the release. There is a method to my madness, Mr. Stampers Anonymous, because I know sometimes Theodore probably looks at my stuff, he's like, seriously? Like, what is this?
He does say that a lot.
He does. He's like, he's judgy. He's judgy, Mr. Ted. He's probably blushing right now if he's watching, but yeah, he's very judgy when I send the art. Like, I don't even get it. Like, that's okay, you don't have to, but when you see it, the makers will get it. The makers will get it. Well, he does a lot of demos. He does. And hopefully he's going to be inspired by this so he can demo a weekend. So take a look at this. I love this one. The whole beauty of, hold on, let me just grab this before they fall off the table. Sorry, I almost threw my stencils on the ground, just trying to call out Ted. Serves me right, all right? So Sharon created this. I love the idea of taking the stamps that could have a very industrial vibe and still give it that splash of color. So here you can see using that number stamp that's there. I bring it in focus because I love how everything stays out of focus in the background. And creating that background with that number stamp and just giving it that pop of color, just using embossing glaze. There's that bullseye. And so the reason I put that bullseye in the set is I wanted to give these guys that anchor point. And so far you can see that many of the makers use that. Not every maker, because you don't have to do that, right? But it certainly brings your eye into focus if you add one of those elements in there. And I just think with all the numbers and how old, I think that's such a great birthday card. Really fun, right? Just think it's just a fun way to use that, right? So Colbert created this one. I love it. I love seeing that mixed media. She does amazing, amazing backgrounds. Very mixed media with some crackle paste. Here we've just got the guy, colored meticulously, I might add. Fussy cut, stamped. And then I also love the idea of incorporating dies, right? So just using a tall alphabet die and then adding to that sentiment. So it's like, hey, what's up? I just think that's just brilliant. Very clever. But there again, you can use these elements in so many different ways when you're creating. And that's the thing that is so inspiring of this, right? And you're going to see what I'm going to show you next. There's several makers that actually created cards using this kind of idea. And I say idea meaning they didn't color the people, right? They didn't color the guys. They just kept them just stamped in that black archival and then just did a background. And I thought it was so cool to see this one. So this one Tammy created. You can see that long slim line. I love the idea of just having the little die cut windows, right? So those guys are just very cool just to have that in there, so you could still go in and write inside the card. But I love how they're framed and just guess who, what's up, you good. I think that's just so fun. Juliana created this one. Again, mixed media. Different maker, right? Didn't color them. And I think that's so cool because I'm not a good color. So when I see this kind of card, I'm like, wow, I would attempt it sometimes, but I like knowing that I don't always have to. I like the fact that this is the larger scale. Both of them use that larger scale guy. So I'm going to show you all the larger scale ones, and then I'll show you some ideas with these little guys. But so fun. Juliana also created this card with these people, but shuffled them up. Hilarious. Such a great card. I love just seeing the guy upside down. Just gives you an idea. I like just taking that and how it was cut on the card. Just took him, just give a little bit of extra space, angle it, and then chop it. So we've got him kind of angled, this guy perfect, this guy going upside down. Very, very clever for these makers to just stick with black and white images used in totally different ways. And even if you love color, Jen Shirk has created this one. Beautiful, colorful background, colorful purple bullseye still, right? The guy is just not colored. And it didn't even dawn on me to even think like that. So to see three different makers all had that kind of same idea when you're creating with it, it's just good. And they fussy cut. I know everybody just wants die cuts, but hey, scissors are your friend. They work good. So I like the idea that yes, you could be a fussy cutter and cut right up to the edge, or maybe have a scan and cut. Some people use a little bit of a border. Some keep a little bit more of a border. I like that look, I really do. I will say that, I don't have any intentions of doing framelits for any future stamps. I just kind of think, there's stamps and there's dies, and they live in two separate worlds. And if you want to cut out an image, then there's scissors, or there's that, a machine for that. So Kath created this one. Here's what I loved about this. So background, grungy, love seeing the stencils and stamps, but how great is that to just use part of your background to stamp and layer, right? So you're still getting all that same cool inking and splattering color that you do in the background. So I've never thought of coloring an image just from whatever's left of a background. So cool, right? Really, really fun. And I love seeing a little ideology thrown in there, right? Little stencil card, just, love seeing the machine heads. Just fun way to incorporate this. And again, very masculine, kind of grungy industrial vibe, which I love. All right. Zoe in Italy created this one. I say Zoe in Italy and Zoe Hillman because we have two Zoes. So Zoe in Italy created this. I like just seeing all the little elements, the little remnants of ideology, just some die cut pieces. I love seeing just the background using some stencils. There's the number stamped, and there's our guy in there. Zoe does a lot of vintage kind of layered stuff where just putting it over ephemera. And that's a great way to remind you that even if you're doing a stamp set, you don't always have to do everything on that stamp set. You can just take an element and incorporate it into maybe a collage that you're doing or a background that you're doing. I think to me that's always an important reminder that everything that we acquire in our stamping world, those are all tools. Now here's another thing that's interesting. Never crossed my mind. 3 different makers saw this set in a different way. 3 different makers. I'm like, what? First up, Anita, right? Very patriotic, very Americana. It just kind of has this red, white bunting from the bullseye. I love seeing that just stamped. This, of course, is over just a coated paper, and you see those guys, and then she uses the star over the 4 for 4th of July, right? Very interesting to see these. And then immediately, as soon as I saw this card, I did think of, like, I don't know, a county fair or something like that with like the guys in the top hats, or maybe it's a horse race, or just something. It took these guys into a totally different mindset for me when they were standing in front of that bunting. And it never would have even crossed my mind to put these in anything kind of, you know, in a patriotic setting in any way. And I thought that that was very cool to see the red, white, and blue. Then Stacy created this one. Same palette, very vintage, red, white, and blue. Little scrap of like denim here, but you can still see that bullseye. You can see the numbers that are embossed there. He's cut out of craft. I love his good grunginess, because we do love a good grunge, right? Layered with some crackle paste. But there again, that whole red, white, and blue, very, I don't know, just I love that palette. And then this one comes in from Zoe Hillman. I'm like, are you serious? Like, how, it's just very cool. She had this, there's July, we've got that circle, but take a look at this, stamping the bullseye in different colors and then just cutting it so it looks like a rosette. I mean, shut up. That is so cool. Using, I'm guessing just the shaping kit, just because you can see that these are sculpted. So just maybe using that shaping kit to kind of give it that little bit of dimension, and then slicing it where it does. It's that Americana rosette. And I love this because this actually kind of has even almost a military look, just the way they're kind of staggered up there. And then I love just seeing that bit of etc. trim. But you can see this is a Stampers Anonymous, an etc. tag, right? That thick board. You can see the paint in there. There's a stencil with crackle paste. I mean, come on, right? Come on. That 3 different makers seeing that set this way, like absolutely wild. So cool to me. Just love that.
Kit for the win.
What's that? Shaping kit. Yeah, because I mean, I will say that it has such a great contour where it looks like that rosette or kind of bunting, because you could take that same idea, slice it in half, and incorporate it kind of that way. So that's the whole benefit of really watching these lives is getting that inspiration and being able to come back and go, what is it that I saw? And knowing that you can either watch the video, but all these photos will be on the website as well. And many of the makers, they love to share technique as well. So that's good. All right, I'm gonna bring in another stack because we're not done with this one. So Yuko created this one. I loved the idea of him being more of an adventurer, you know, so she took that city map stencil, did a little print. I love the little plus from the stamp set, now became an X. See, that's that stamp, just turned like that. So it's almost like a little X marks the spot, right? And I love just kind of adding things, you know, faraway places and daring adventures. It makes him, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just blown away. I'm speechless whenever I just see all these ideas from a stamped image. How lucky am I just to have so many amazing makers that they just make me look good. They do, because I certainly don't do that. So, I mean, I love it. It's amazing. So Vicky created this. I mean, totally different vibes. So clever to see how these images work together. You could tell Vicky's palette, industrial black. She did that beautiful flower on the black. And now we've got this guy with just a very simple card. We've got what's up. I love that he's colored in all those kind of grayscales, but I love the cactus coming out of his hat. I mean, come on. That's just fun. Why not? Why not use that just to kind of go right over the top? So cool. Very clever. Just so many different clever ideas of how things could work. Cassie created this. There you go. I saw these guys as definitely steampunk. So seeing these put with like the little gears for his monocle, very cool, because he does. He has like a safari hat kind of look. Just seeing the gears, and again, different stencils, crackle paste, you see that stamp really works. I've used this number for many things. I've done die cuts and stickers and all that, so I really wanted a stamp for that. But I love the layering of this, Cassie. And you see so many makers cut them out. So if all these makers could cut out all these people, not too challenging, except probably around a little mustache area. But I love it. I love the colors of this, that rusty vibe. She also did this one. So Cassie created this one too. Again, just to share that you can take a stamp set and just give it a new idea, right? It doesn't always have to have the same look and feel, even if you're the one making them. Just take a look at the next one and go, okay, well, this one says importer. So to me, I guess this guy is definitely the adventurer with his hat, because he's got a little importer. He's got that's the ideology flair, some little gears, what's up, that bullseye from a map, but same maker, 2 totally different ideas for that stamp set, right? Amazing. I love it. So cool and so fun. Keisha created this one. So Keisha does a lot of vibrant, bright colors. I'm not going to say she's always a clean and simple stamper, but she definitely has an amazing use of color and likes to create stamps or cards that have a nice, crisp effect to this. And I love seeing how she was going to use these images, because some of them I'm like, whoa, this is going to be, you know, way too grungy, way too vintage. And well, in true Keisha style, she's like, oh yeah, sit back and watch, Holtz, and I'll show you. Look at that. So cool to see just that background stamped, much like Sharon did with the glaze, but just done using oxide. You can see that stencil created that texture in the background. And we've got that guy that's just stamped and die cut. A great birthday card, right? So cool. Just beautiful. Just utilizing your color on the stamp itself. And that's what's creating the background. And everything else can have a monochromatic look to it. I love that. Tammy created this guy, really fun to me. It reminds me very much of like a carnival or a circus, maybe just because of the floating heads and the different bullseyes, but I love that. Guess who? That slimline card. Love the palette, love the sewing. So much work goes into these cards, especially like, you know, embossing. That's another tip if you're working with Archival. I'll let you know this as well. This is a great embossing ink also. So if you want to get your black embossed images super dark, you can stamp in black Archival and emboss in black. I'm not saying that's what she did, but I'm saying that because it's oil based, it doesn't have the same open time as an embossing ink, but often if I'm working on mixed media heavy stock or something coated, I would stamp in Archival and emboss because I'm going to get a nice crisp image, because sometimes embossing ink is a little too gooey, and so it just blurs out when you're trying to emboss it. So keep that in mind for Archival. All right. Next, we're going to get into these little guys. I'll just show you some of the makes where the makers use that. I wanted to keep it separate just so you kind of understood scale and proportion, because, you know, having those smaller stamps are really great for a whole different vibe or a whole different card, right? So Kath created this. You can see those guys are stamped right across the front, all three of them, and these three are connected in an image. Doesn't mean they have to stay that way. If you get your set and you want to cut them apart, go ahead. But I did keep them together to make it just kind of easier to stamp in there. I love seeing focus on the good, and then of course seeing that bullseye focus. So even though the bullseye is big, because it was designed to be scale for the background, I'll have to keep digging through the cards to show you. See how, as I mentioned, like the bullseye with one, I also wanted to make sure that these guys were to scale that you could fit all three of them within that same bullseye. So I think that would be good. Love it. All right. So Colbert created this one. Love this also. She's all about backgrounds. And that's the thing. If you've been following these lives and you create a bazillion backgrounds, you're like, what do I do with them? Here you go. Take your background, take your stamps. That's where those bolds really come in. Because see, it doesn't matter that you have collage elements and all that. That just adds to the beauty of it. Stamp that bold. And then I love that. That was not by design, that was by luck, but I love that she took one of those little guys, stamped him, cut him out, and he fit right inside the O in U. So that was a great way to incorporate those people. That was really good. What you need? Need some?
No.
Okay. This one, so much fun. I mean, did you get it? Did you get something? Did you need something?
No, okay.
Oh, okay. I thought maybe you needed a set. Yuko created this. Really cute. Love seeing just using with ideology, right? You've got a little baseboard in there. We've got the photo booth, just using a Sizzix die, little bunting on there, stencil. Just think a fun way. And again, creating those people, just keeping them in black and white. I think that's great. Very, very cool. Then we've got, oh, this was Barbara. Oh, sorry. Oh, you could have just told me. That's all right. Sorry, my bad. Because I think, did I say Tammy? I did. No, you could just tell me. You can call me out. Because, sorry, this one is Barbara. There's like there's a whole thing. I can just tell in the background when I said something's going on. Like DMs are happening or messages. So sorry, Barbara. This is done by Barbara. I just pick it up because Tammy's been doing the slimline, so I saw it. So yes, Barbara created this card. It will be credited properly on my website as well. But it's a beautiful card, regardless of the maker. But yes, Barbara gets the credit for this one. Just very cool. Sorry about that. I'll pay more attention to the backs, because I think I kind of have it from style, but yeah, I probably should read who did this, but I'm guessing. So I know. No, okay. Anita created this card. Love the card. There we go. Just making sure now. Creating a collage. I love seeing that that stencil in the background, right? That wonderful city stencil. Love, again, using ephemera, right? Whether you have tags from ideology, whether you have tickets, whether you're doing a collage, and just creating these pieces from a background. We've got that mini guy. So even though they're the trio, you can certainly use whichever one you want for whatever piece that you're going to work on. And then you can see here that observations stamp used again. I love how those quotes are just being used on so many different things. All right. Nico created this one. Love seeing these guys. Love the rainbow for pride. Love is love. And just seeing all of them stamped in all those different colors. I love this, Nico. So good. Yep. Nico. See, I know. All right. Love seeing the colors cut out, layered, and look at the stencil in the background. So see, there's that little rainbow. Just really clever how he used this stamp set to create this. I love seeing all the colors, and I love seeing them stamped in all the different colors as well. That's another great thing when it comes to that stamp set, is just seeing just the faces stamped in different colors, right? From green and yellow, and I just love it. All the colors of the rainbow. Beautiful, beautiful. Great one. All right, we got a couple more makes for this one. This I'm just gonna share. Zoe created this one. We have a pillow box thing going, so I do love that she used this guy on a pillow box, because again, even if you have different Sizzix dies, whether you have boxes, tags, bags, whatever, you can still incorporate stamped elements just to make them customized and personal. So yeah, this was a little gift to me in this box. I love it. But Zoe created also this one, Zoe Hillman, and it made me laugh because, well, I don't know, I might just keep this on my work table because I love the idea of the tag, that bullseye, and then how she used those three guys, but it was really about like, you good. And it was almost like, I don't know, like a little mood gauge, just depending on kind of how you're feeling. I think it was just very clever, but I just love how everything was used, right? Covering this with a little bit of glaze, right, over the top of it. Just a lot of fun. And seeing all the images, when you start looking at all the backgrounds, like I called out about Nico using that stencil. Here you can see numbers in the background, the dots in the background, and that's often why when I'm designing a set, I'll throw in different elements just because you can go in and add those pieces. So I just think it's really, really cute. So again, so many great makes, so many different things you can see. I don't normally, when I'm doing an image, put both scales of the same image. Sometimes we'll do one and then maybe we'll do a larger or a smaller in a different set. But when it came to this set, I just thought that the guys were so cool as a trio, but also seeing the makers just use them independently. I'm really happy that I did them in the smaller scale, and seeing all of these great cards, whether they have just a clean vibe, a grungy vibe, a wonderful Americana vibe, a very colorful, fun vibe, a very carnival vibe by Barbara. Yep. And just so many different looks. I think that's, everything from Cassie to Zoe to Yuko. See, now I just know these by heart just by seeing them. But you get the idea that a stamp set is absolutely limitless when it comes to inspiration from the maker. So cool. So shout out to the makers for that one too, right? You could tell that was a favorite. Look at the pile. Unbelievable. So thank you guys. All right. Beautiful, beautiful. So fun. Thanks for catching me on that, Mari. I'd rather you catch me on live on that one. Okay. And we'll take those. Woo! 2 more sets, guys. We've got this. We do. All right. So next we're going to get into bold sayings. Now you've seen this throughout these makes of how the makers have used these with other stamp sets. But these makes I kind of set out because I felt that the text was really the focus. Okay, there might be some other accents, but I wanted you to see that even if you just had this set and you didn't have any of the other sets, how could you just use this set? All right. So these first cards, these are from Jen. If you follow Jen, you may have seen she did a sneak peek on this. Many of the makers do sneak peeks. So if you don't follow the makers, I encourage you to follow them on social media because they do a lot of sneak peeks up until the live. So many of you have seen it. You can go to timholtz.com, click on the makers page, and you'll see links for all the makers that make for me for different brands, and definitely follow them.
I put the link before, I'll do it again
right now. Thanks, Mario. So these cards, again, beauty in simplicity, creating backgrounds with inks and oxides and then just stamping that bold saying and embossing. You can accent it with some little dimensional pearls on there, really cute. But sitting down and creating those backgrounds and then just stamping these, this is cool. This reminds me of like a Wham video from like the 80s. I love this. I love the idea of just these colorful cards because you can sit down, do your backgrounds, stamp these sayings, and have everything from thank you cards to hello cards to just best day ever, like a congratulations card, just kind of a cheer up, focus on the good, or a birthday card. And that's really kind of my intention for this set. It's just to cover a little bit of everything when we need those cards with sayings, all right? But if you've done those grungy backgrounds, as I mentioned, Kubert created these, and I think it's so cool to take those backgrounds, those techniques, the sprays, the stains, the stencils, the oxides, the inks, and then create those cards. And I think one of the great ideas when it comes to something bold, and I'm not really good at this, but I totally noticed this on the card, is just taking kind of a white pen and adding that little shadow. I've seen cards before. I think Zoe's done cards in the past where you stamp the image in white and then kind of offset it and stamp it again. But sometimes if you're stamping black on a background, even if you're using the dark black soot archival, right, you can see that it still pops. But I think if you have a white pen, going in and adding that little highlight just gives that even more dimension because that's stamped directly on the substrate. Just beautiful, right? Over a nice grungy background, right? You don't always have to be grungy, right? Told you that. So Keisha, who does nice, clean, simple cards, you can see the bullseye that was in Inquisitive, but this was really about that. I love just seeing that bold on this beautiful palette of bullseyes because the bullseye to me just became a wonderful circle pattern. And I love the focus on the good, a little ideology, mirrored stars. And I like that, you know, when you're stamping, even with oxide, that you can kind of get it to where it looks like it's going through or it's woven through when you're stamping with archival and you're stamping with oxide. Love it. So clever. All right. So Juliana created this, and wait till you see these two cards. Two totally different makers, and I cannot believe how similar they are in how they're done. So Juliana created this. I love seeing that bold. Again, using any of your dies that you have that you want to frame this. You can use a decal trimmer. You can really frame this however you want. I love seeing that crackle paste through the stencil. So you can see that a lot of those stencils that even have that cool repeat pattern, you can still utilize it to support just bold text, right? But take a look at this card that Vicki Evans did. What? I mean, it's like pretty much the same size card and almost exactly the same size die. It's like, are you kidding me? That's so, it's just cool how that happens. So this appears to be alcohol lift ink, right? I love seeing that lifted off over black. It creates such a beautiful look. You can see those gears. Those gears are from observation, and because they have that sketch look, if you do a lot of lifting, I'm guessing this is lifting, seeing through that, I just think it's really cool how that is. I love that both of these cards using bold sayings have completely different aesthetics to that, right? Whether you're going industrial or whether you're just going whimsy, clean, simple, vintage, all those different looks, because the saying is what's really, well, that's what's standing out. So cool. I love that. So much fun to see. So Sharon created this, and you can see these are a lot of stamps that we just did in Inquisitive, from the numbers, the bullseyes. I love the fun colors from the blues and the olive greens, but boom, having that black archival, that focus on the good, really draws your eye there. And that is the importance of that. Like, it was so great to have, you know, both the stamps and the archival come out in the same release because, well, it works hand in hand. When you're stamping backgrounds, you want that really nice black ink to stand out. And that's just stamped on there. It's not embossed. That's just when you have a really nice dark black ink to stamp. And I think it's really fun. A great card. I mean, when I saw this, I'm like, Sharon? Wow, I like that. I like the color. Yeah, surprised me on that one, Sharon. You did. All right. Vicki created this as well. Now, she did this on a card front, but not everything has to be a card. You can just take a panel, a chipboard panel. But I like the idea that if your background is very subtle, whether you're using inks, whether you're using a different embossing glaze for accent, that you can still incorporate that text almost floating over your background. So a text doesn't always have to be stamped in black. stamp doesn't always have to be done in metallic. Sometimes just almost ghosting it out in white would be really, really nice over a background, right? Quite beautiful. It's quite beautiful. And you can, when you tip this one especially, you'll see all the different layers in there. Just really good. Now this next card Joy did, and I was like, that is so cool, brilliant. So my friend Joy, she does a lot with my fabrics. This is one of the fabrics in Eclectic Elements. And I love the fact that she took her love for fabric, because she sews with Mama and does all sorts of cool things. But to see fabric used on a card in this way, love that, Joy. So here is just, this is a piece of fabric. It's one of the fabrics sewn on. You can see the sewing on there. But then it is stamped and embossed. So there is the glaze over that fabric, right? What a great idea to take bold and stamp it over fabric. I never thought of that. I'm sure I've stamped over, you know, background paper or whatever, but to utilize fabric in there, because this card has just, it has just such a wonderful, elegant texture to it. And then just adding that ideology heart with a little bit of string is just beautiful. So I love seeing that embossing. And then she took that same glaze and then glazed the paper that she layered it on. So that really kind of brings your eye into that bold saying, right? Beautiful. Stamp and emboss on fabric. There you go. Yes, yes, yes. So good. All right. These next two, these are from Jen as well. A lot of rainbow vibes going on, but this is where you can talk about the stencil being the background. So because you like the whole look of, say, the rainbows or that pattern or all of those dots, and then just stamping in archival as your main focus. And both of these cards are done that way. But the cool thing about this is one is done in hickory smoke. So you can see the benefit of having hickory smoke because it is a gray. You're able to see through that. So you can still see your bits of color, right, come through, whether it's the circles, the dots. So you're still able to totally see it, but you also, it almost looks like it's kind of floating within your background. Or again, you have that nice black soot archival, and that's just going to dominate everything over the top. So just changing your archival ink colors when you're stamping, right? That nice thing about having the bold is that you can either be right over the top of it, or you can still have it as part of your background. Beautiful. So seeing those inks kind of in play, I think is also important to remember. You have to see those inks just definitely in play. So this next card, this is created by Barbara. I love this background, Barbara. I love the idea of seeing that stencil printed, right? Where you get that beautiful patina popping through those circles and then accented in the gears. And then you see that focus on the good. There's that bold. So again, you can use the bold sayings, especially if you're into collage, whether you're going to do different techniques with stamp and embossing glaze, whether you want to do oxides or paints, whether you're going to embellish. That's a nice thing about having a nice bold saying, that even if you're doing a background with a lot of pattern, and it does, and that's what's great. It's got dots, it's got pluses, it's got gears. That still draws your eye to it because we needed a bold saying. And that's I think why when we did these at Christmas, the makers really loved the idea, because I thought this might be a little bit, I don't know, over the top, just too bold. But when you see it, it's like, no, not at all. That's kind of what we need. Now this one, I actually had to do a double take when I found out who made this card. I couldn't believe it. Paula created this card. It's a shaker, you guys. Like, it's got, Paula created this card. So this is stamped on acetate, right? Now I'm not sure if Paula used archival for this or stays on, because this is sometimes where I jump to stays on, but I'm not sure. So but I love it. I love that the bold saying. Remember how I mentioned like the font already looks worn, so when you're stamping it, you don't have to worry about it being perfect. It just lends itself to that. But it does have acetate. It's got these wonderful little stars that go under there, right? That do shake around in there. I love that, because normally when I see a shaker card, I can tell because it's, you know, it's thick, it's built up with foam tape, but this is almost like a little packet and it's stitched right on the edge. But look at the background. Now, how long this took her to do, I'm not entirely sure, but I do know that it's the same stamp, stamped again and again and again. The how old in all the different colors. But isn't that a great, fun card? Happy birthday wishes to you, and then how old? Again, taking this and using stamps that we had, say, from Inquisitive. Just a lot of fun. But yeah, seeing all the bright color rainbow shaker from Paula, I love this one. This great job, P. It's really, really fun. So another maker that I'm very grateful to work with is Jeanette. And Jeanette is mixed media, right? If you don't follow her, you really should. She does a lot of great mixed media work. And one of the challenges that is really important to remember as a maker is to stay within your wheelhouse of what you do. Sure, there's a lot of cards, but Jeanette really does journal pages and canvas and things like that. And so to incorporate stamps and elements in that, that's a great reminder for mixed media people that are doing specific art journal, junk journals. Maybe you're not a card maker and you think, I really have no use for stamps because I don't make cards. No, you can still use it. This happens to just be a canvas panel that she did that is mixed media with feathers and ephemera. But there you go. We've got that focus on the good. Using one of those in your collage work with all of the layers, I just think that just really supports the use of stamped images. And you'll see some other work that she does just using different pieces. But that to me is always important when it comes to showcasing the different styles of makes, is that you don't always have to be a card maker to work with stamps. All right. So we've got, those were all the different ones for bold sayings. You can see, as we've seen them, of course, throughout all the other makes, right? We've seen them show up on all the cards, but really these are the ones that I thought it was all about that saying. And the background just was like the supporting cast, which I thought so cool. All right. Our final set. We're good, right, Mario? We're in the home stretch of this one. Who knew, right? 5 sets. You think, oh, that's not going to be much. And then it's like, what? Are you kidding? So, Mario said, good thing it was only 5. Come on. All right. So next we're going to talk about observations, our guy. And you're going to see how he's used in different ways to create a totally different look and feel. All right. So Sharon created this card. I love just seeing him with that wonderful rainbow background. You can see that by having those lighter color inks, right? The Hickory Smoke Archival gives us the ability to stamp background images and then still do watercolor over the top of it. I love how these sayings, I don't know, I just think even the style of it really creates kind of that whole idea, kind of pull it together. Because to me, font choice is also really important when it comes to the images that it goes with. But I love his little monocle. I love that she did that little detail of some glossy accents over that. But there you go. Sharon likes to use a lot of color, and you might look at this and go, oh, he's very steampunk. No, this is all about the dream, right? A very colorful dream with the gears. So she took every element that was in that stamp set and just made it happen. That's what it was. So Vicky created this. So remember when I talked to you about this set and that you're going to see him use in his entirety, and you're also going to see him kind of peeking in different areas. I don't want to say creeping in because he's not a creeper. He's just peeking in different ways. And that's the importance of this. You can use him fully, but you can also just use parts and pieces. And his expression to me kind of changes a little bit. I love that this is layered over that card. You can see there's a stencil in the background, right? I love seeing the dots and even she made little screws out of it. The little plus in there, very clever, totally clever. And then being lost is worth being found. Just nice because there's that map kind of going through the background as well. But great way to take that same stamp set just in the first 2 makes and go from very bright, where he can be kind of a whimsical Wonka kind of dreamer, into something that just has that great industrial vibe as well. So that to me is what an image is about. An image should just speak to you as the maker to kind of do your thing. Zoe Hillman created this one. Again, that whole steampunk maker. And take a look at this. There's so much going on and that I love. Here's that 3D folder in the background, right? You can see all of those mechanics in the back. And then she's got the gears from the stamp set stamped on both sides, but then fussy cut around it to almost create kind of this reveal, like I don't know, like his way of thinking is being slightly exposed or peaked. And then we have him on here. I love that. And I love all these little hardware heads just to add some accent. Just such a cool steampunk card, right? Completely different vibe. And I won't keep pulling all these cards back, I promise, but it's important to just kind of see that when you look at a stamp set, you can't always judge it. You have to just look for the inspiration, because the inspiration, I think, is often going to completely overwhelm you with the possibilities of a stamped image. That's why I love stamps. That's why I love dies, because a shape has so much more, I don't know, like life to it, purpose. So this one Juliana created, and again, just taking that image. I'm not sure if Juliana colored any of the images. They're all just, whatever stamp set she uses, just stamped in the black archival, black soot, and then just put over a background. And I think that's great. That to me just really shows that you can still create a card, but all her color is back there. You can see the stencils. There's the city, all those lines, that great mosaic kind of look. And there, of course, the dots. And see how they just pair well together because of that style, that design. I just think it's really, really, I love the background. And then there's a little gear stamped in there. And again, done with archival, because that would allow you to still stamp in the images. And then whether you're blending or spraying, that gear is always going to remain that crisp detail because it's stamped in archival. Just beautiful, right? Anita created this card. Absolutely stunning. Love the background. I love the fact that she took the gears, it's just one section, and stamped it to create a corner, right? So I told you I wasn't going to do it, but I'll keep doing it. So here you had Zoe, like use them side by side. Here you had Anita create a corner. Again, sometimes people go, why did you just do this? Why the fragment? Because that allows you as the maker to do however you see that image. But I love that little bit of metallic on there. It kind of looks like, I don't know if it's colored with alloys. I don't know, Anita. Is that alloys? Is that perfect pearls? But those gears have, see that little metallic sheen? It's pretty. It's really pretty. Yeah, I'm not sure if that's perfect pearls or alloys. Something metallic is over those gears. Stunning. And because it's archival, you can watercolor. And then that guy is just embossed. Really, really cool. And there's that glossy accents over the monocle as well. A lot of fun. Oh my gosh.
She said crayon.
Ooh, wow. I gotta try that. That's metallic crayon? That is epic. Look at that, guys. You see? I would have never guessed that one. No way. That's so see, because see, I don't use the crayons in that way. Usually it's just that accent. I kind of blend them in with something. I'm gonna give that a go. Thanks, Anita. That was cool. This card, this is from Nico. So much fun to see some of the older images, right? That little hat put on him. I think that gave him such a wonderful, whimsy, quirky style. I like seeing that again, seeing some of this is the big gears. It's an older stamp, blueprint in the back. There's the city using that stencil in there. But again, pairing in like, it's great to see some of the older images come back just as an accent. And then we've got that, and look at that. I love just how his monocle is shattered. Look at that, so cool, and that little tint. Well done, Nico. Very cool with all those layers. And that ring fastener, that's so cool around his collar. So cool. Love it. Beautiful. All right. Kath created this tag. This is an etc. tag. So many wonderful details to this because, of course, when you're dealing with etc., it's a thicker substrate. So I love the inks and the colors that went in. I love that she used the dyes for what if, because this is all about the future belongs to the curious. But taking that bullseye stamp that you have from Inquisitive works really well with him. And I love just seeing that little bit of ball chain just attached on there. See, look at that. There's the dimension right there. That metal chain, what a great use for ball chain. It's also under there just to add. This really has, again, like a cool circus vibe, right? Isn't that a great detail? Great detail around that. I think it's fun. Very cool. Then we have another amazing envelope from Tifa. I think it's so cool to see this art just applied to envelope art. Love how he comes in from the corner, how it's die cut around the window. I love that it just using, see, look at that. This is all hand done. All these little dots, like dot, 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 like so cool. Just to see that the use of stamps in the background, those are the numbers from Inquisitive, but then taking observation, taking that stamp set, and I love how it's all under that acetate window. It's just almost like this own little handheld shadow box. So cool. But then you get to see, this is, of course, imagination is the reality of a dreamer. But then we've got the little numbers in there. We've got different letters, layers, numbers, rubs, just cool. And I love the accent detail of him in pink, especially on craft. Just is beautiful, right? Isn't that so cool? I love just how because I looked at this and so he's not cut and applied, right? So he's stamped directly on this substrate and then she went in and actually cut around him and then cut the window. So he's not added on top. He's actually part of that entire envelope piece. Just awesome, right? So cool. Just such a great addition. Such a great addition to seeing the makes, Latifa. Thanks. All right, we'll take these. Got a few more. Look at the big cards. I love that. So Emma created this one. I love this guy. I love just, of course, seeing him just big, but all these other little elements. The pointing finger. We've got the, I just like it. He's a little award winner. We've got a little ideology adornment here, that star fastener. I love the colors that she layered as well. Emma, this is so cool with the metallic and the paper. Just so beautiful. Really, anytime I see just Emma's big cards, I'm like, that's it. It could just go in a frame. You give it to someone and it's a big art piece. I think it's so cool. But there you go. You can utilize him. And there, when I talked about using him in his entirety, we've got that, right? Then we have some makes that really were just, I don't know. I think I just kind of put these at the end because I thought just that the idea of how they were used were just, I don't know, just different. That to me is what it was about. It was just used in a totally different way. And I loved what it was. So I wanted to kind of give it its own attention, if you will, right? And what's nice is like here, Sharon just kind of gives me her little note. So thanks, Sharon. But I love the idea of taking a card front, right, or a piece of paper, utilizing an element that is not how it is delivered, if you will. So let's just look at the stencil. We see these rainbows, if you will, as a line. This now just became a background pattern. And because they're different sizes, I know that this was created with both this stencil and the mini version of that. And I thought that was a very clever way to use a stencil that I've not seen, to just take one particular design element of a stencil and just ink through that to create the repeat. And then simplicity is its own form of artistry. Totally true, right? Just that idea is right there. It is so simple in what it is, but I love the artistic background that it created. I thought it was very clever to take an element of a stencil and make a background, okay? Another thing that I found very clever, and Jeanette had to actually tell me about this because I didn't quite get it, I'll be honest, but then when I saw it, I'm like, that is very clever. So in the mixed media world, in her mixed media world, mark making is very important and significant. And so when she saw the cactus, she just loved the idea of just making a mark, right? Not about cactus, just almost making just a very bold shape and design that she incorporated in her mixed media. And she said she's going to be doing kind of a collection or series, if you will, of showing how to change these or use these, the solid bits, as marks in the art. And that's what it's all about. It's about just a totally clever, unique, different idea. Sharon created this as well. Again, that idea, because when I talked about that city map stencil, this, I don't even recognize that. To me, it's just stained glass. It's utilizing that stencil and paste to create stained glass fragments, right? Just going in and coloring some of those elements and leaving some of that section out. So again, another idea for utilizing that. So we have like mark making shapes, we have a repeat stencil, you have kind of this stained glass. Then Jeanette created some art pieces. Again, we've got a journal page and a panel, but there's so many different components to this that could often get overlooked if you're not looking for them. So first, let's just talk about the background, right? That collage paper background, that tissue paper, that's the stencil, that's the city map. There's the dot stencil in there. There's more of that city map stencil in as well. Then we have some ideology engravings, transparent wings, some little ribbon on a half tag. She does some of her wonderful writing, a little bit of washi, and then boom, there you go from observations. Remember when I talked about these quotes being very significant just in art, right? Even if you're not using him, just these are also really a great foundational element. So Jeanette created this entire panel piece using stencils, a little bit of writing on there, and then that becomes the focal point, the engravings, and of course that quote. Just beautiful, right? Or utilizing this, again, taking a journal page, just doing prints, but utilizing that guy from Inquisitive, just stamping him, right? I love that little bit of label tape on there. There's, looks like some mummy cloth kind of collaged in there, some field notes, and then again, imagination is the reality of a dreamer. So your mixed media approach with stamps does not always have to be make the card, stamp, color, whatever. And that is what, I love about the makers. So whether you know, mixed media, whether it's envelopes, whether it's cards, whether it's steampunk, whether it's bright and colorful. Everybody has a place to showcase their creative style, which I think is super important. All right, we've got a few more cards just to go with this, and then we will wrap it up. So another one, again, about the background. Jen created this card. Love seeing that rainbow background, and then we start seeing him kind of blood off the side. This, man, serious fussy cutting, because that is what that is. But another idea that I thought was very clever is that even if you stamp it out, if you want to break up the way this is laid out, right? Maybe you don't want that text to run straight across the top. I think stamping it and cutting it out was a very clever way to kind of break that up and put it on that colorful background, that colorful card, right? Yuko created this, stamped him. You can see now his scale compared to a number 8 tag. Love seeing that tag put upside down on a card. So many people that watch the demos, what do I do with a tag? A tag is just a layer. A tag is a layer, or a tag could just be a card in and of itself, like Nico did with the Cactus. But incorporating this on a card base, it still becomes an element, and you can utilize that tag hole to add a charm or a ribbon or anything like that. And we've got the future belongs to the curious. So love the palette of that too. Just very, very vintage, which I love. All right. Then Zoe Hillman created this one, stamped and watercolored, but take a look at just the shading and watercoloring on craft. Seeing all of that grungy goodness, but all these elements kind of cut and layered. I don't know, it gave him a whole different vibe. Totally different vibe. I like the fact that, you know, this background, you can see the gear stamped and colored in, really, I don't know, becomes this anchor point, and all these other pieces just kind of float over the top. That little flag that's stitched on, just brilliant. Because this, to me, it's a whole different look and feel of this card. But these are exactly the same stamps used, right? Same. Gear, curious, guy. Gear, curious, guy. Totally different look, right? Because you as the maker get to discover that. That's the cool thing. Is that wrong? It's not? Oh man, I am just botching it today. Holy moly. Zoe in Italy. Gosh, I don't know what it is. There's nothing to do with Italy, I promise. I just think, okay, I'm going to tell you what it is. I'm going to be...
Let's do the back of the cards.
Yeah, well, no, I'm going to tell you. Yeah, we'll figure this out internally, but like some makers mark and some makers don't mark. So in the case of not marking, we try to not mess up the card so it's written in pencil, and see, like when the light hits it, I can't really see it. So I just try to guess. I'm not making excuses for my bad eyesight because I am getting glasses.
No, I put
yeah.
Post-it notes on it when
right.
it comes in and give it to you, but then the Post-it notes fall off.
Right.
Last night you're like, where do these Post-it notes go?
Exactly. And then some makers, like on Barbara's card, like they want to tell me what they used, but then the Post-it note covers the name. Anyway, we'll figure this out. I'm so sorry. So yes, this is Zoe in Italy that created this card. Oh man, what a day. I'm usually better than this, but yeah, I need a better marking system.
We do.
Yeah. So here we go. So this one.
Zoe said, I'm sorry, I'll mark you from now on.
Yeah, we had to mark some, and it's like, oh boy. No, I think what I'm going to do for the makers is I'm going to actually get you, like, everyone's going to get new stamps to stamp their card that we'll have them made where it's all the same that I know what to look for. Okay, there we go. A whole nother sidebar on that. All right, so take a look at this one. Tammy created this one. This is all done on metallic, and I love that because of that industrial vibe, that industrial look. So seeing this done on metallic craft stock, I love the embossing on there because again, when you do that embossing, it really allows you to take your images, whether they are bold or not. But again, a totally different perspective. We've seen this guy a lot of times kind of coming off the right edge, but when he's off on the left edge, I love how she highlighted that monocle as well. Just really fun. Again, the Dreamer, that little bit of chain that just kind of connects all the ideas together. Not sure if that's where she was going with it, but that's really how I interpreted this card. I just thought it was wonderful to see an entire card done on a metallic base, right? So, so beautiful. Love it. All right. Then we've got this card. Keisha created this one. Again, seeing that colorful background, utilizing these elements, and then you can see in the back, again, that cityscape, or the city map, that stencil, just done black ink over white. Very, very cool. And I love seeing just her use of color on there. So the beauty of this, of course, is taking the personality of observations and making it your artistic style. I love that. I love seeing the colors through his face. That's the other thing of just having that open image, is you can really capture that. All right. The next one, show you this card. Juliana created this one. And what's really unique about cards, like a lot of times when I look at them, I just have to like look and look. I glance when I like sort them out, but then I really like pay attention when I'm looking through the camera to see this. So I will say that the first time I saw this, I assumed that these gears were these gears, but now that I'm looking at it, this isn't. This is actually that she did both, right? She used the small gears that were here, right? But then she also used that big gears from the Inventor set, and how cool that they look really, really work well together. And then through that, the color through his face, that's done with that map stencil. So for those that are seeing like, I don't know, I don't get the city map, it's really, as I see the makers using it, it's almost more of this fragmented, almost crackled look, right? We see this fragments of color. We've seen like on Natifa's envelope, it looked like crackle paste. Sharon looked like stained glass. It was really interesting because I think those heavy line breaks in the stencil are what really kind of give it that supporting layers, because we've got a stamped image, a stenciled image, and then another image on top. And because he's embossed, that's what makes him really stand out over all the other layers. Just such a cool way to use so much detail, and you don't think about it, right? Because you wouldn't think through his face that you're going to want to put a stencil in two different stamped images, but it works perfect, especially if you start switching up your mediums, right? When you go for archival and you're stamping, you're distressing, blending, and then you're embossing over the top. Just wonderful, really wonderful. All right, so the last make for, well, just for the makes and for this set, this one is from Paula. Love seeing how vintage she did this, but also I just think his little rosy cheeks just kind of did it for me. Utilizing this, believe the foundation of this is one of the Ideology backdrops paper, I believe. I could be wrong because today I seem to be. So you better catch me on today, Mario. Love seeing just that background with the vintage typography going through that, right? Very cool. And then we've got that image stamped in archival, and then I just love the whimsy touches of color that Paula does. And then being lost is worth being found. So cool, right? I know the cheeks. Everyone's like, we love the cheeks. It's really, and then just of course we've got just the details of the distressed crackle paste that goes around this, because I think that's cool. And then we've got a little bit of that mummy cloth. So that's why Paula always stocks up. I think there's many makers, Paula, Emma, really stock up on the mummy cloth every Halloween, because it's like this beautiful, I wanted to call it oh my gauze, because it's just wonderful gauzy stuff that could be inked, but because it's in a trim, a ribbon, it's just is really beautiful. So love that. Great make. So you can see just from our observations, so many different looks, so many different personalities to how it's done from the guy itself, right? From his actual image to even just using components from the sets, you know, even if it's just the text that goes on there, it's just really is remarkable. So cool, so amazing, so many ideas. Holy moly. Yeah, it is kind of like cheesecloth, but it's not as, mummy cloth is, it's not as loose as cheesecloth, right? It has a little bit of a tighter weave. It's kind of in between. But yeah, so many brilliant ideas. So many. Amazing job makers.